Welcome to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid. A set of conversations about our government, our politics, and the kind of country we aspire to be. And now, here's your host, Edwin Eisendrath, on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Hello, everybody. Happy Saturday. Another wonderful weekend here in the upper Midwest. It is Pride weekend. So, my gosh, I hope you're going to the parade. WCPT will, of course, have a float. It is a remarkable celebration always, and a celebration that we must always have. All right, well, here is another celebration coming, our 250th birthday. And the worst president in American history is, let's see, failing at diplomacy, failing at warfare, and failing at gathering and assessing intelligence. This makes the world more dangerous and leaves us less prepared. Let me elaborate on this. Russia appears on the verge of a very important victory in Donbass in eastern Ukraine, but the cost for them has been enormous. Crimea, that large diamond-shaped peninsula into the Black Sea that for a time was the southernmost part of Ukraine before being annexed by Russia, is under siege. Ukraine has successfully destroyed most of the infrastructure that would carry fuel to the region. Russia is desperate to hold Crimea. Russians living in Crimea are desperate to leave. Meanwhile, Ukraine's capability to damage energy infrastructure in Russia itself has grown. Their attacks have been so successful that Russia may have to limit energy exports to meet domestic demand, a huge economic loss for Putin. Hardliners in Russia are urging the use of tactical nuclear weapons. There are reports, whether true or just Russian propaganda, that some are arguing to target London. Sergei Lavrov, Russia's brilliant and dangerous foreign minister, wants to know if the agreement Trump and Putin made in Anchorage died in Evian at the recent G7 summit. Well, whether he is actually worried that Donald Trump is switching sides, or whether he is simply reminding Trump that he's watching, it is not known. But there are also reports that Europe is making contingency plans because they no longer believe they can count on the United States if Russia expands the war to pressure them to abandon Ukraine. Ukraine, Russia, and Europe have all learned one shared lesson from this terrible war, and that is that Donald Trump cannot be trusted. Under Trump, the United States no longer provides credible, clear, and strategic international leadership. As a result, the possibility of an expanded war in Europe grows every day. And should that happen, God help us, should it happen, it would be a catastrophe far greater than anything since the Second World War. And if calamity comes, are we prepared? No, we are not. By confusing the ability to coerce with the hard work of diplomacy, in the course of a single year and a half, Donald Trump has squandered the global political capital presidents of both parties and for more than a century have accumulated on our behalf. America is more isolated than it has been in 100 years. He has alienated our allies and pushed our trading partners into new alliances, not with us, but with China. His foreign policy negotiators, J.D. Vance, Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, and Marco Rubio, have not a single success to point to anywhere in the world. The Board of Peace that was supposed to rebuild Gaza, a failure. Russia and Ukraine, Trump doesn't even know what side to be on. Venezuela, what even was that? Our trade imbalance barely changed in a year. What we stand for in the world? J.D. Vance traveled to Europe to tell them they aren't white enough. And as utterly inept as Trump is at foreign policy, he's even worse as a commander-in-chief. He boasts of ending wars. He did not end wars. Instead, he started them in Venezuela, in Iran, and against small boats in the Caribbean and Pacific. But despite the most powerful military on the planet, he has not won any of these wars. His defense secretary, Peacock Pete, seems to delight in blowing things up and hectoring reporters. Yet of strategic successes, he has not delivered one. Not one. Not one. How are we safer after spending hundreds of billions of dollars, losing 13 American lives and injuring, I don't know, hundreds of others? Trump cannot say. No one can say, because we are not safer. Foreign policy and war fighting both rely on intelligence, and here too, Trump has put Americans at risk. This time, however, we are not at risk simply because of incompetence, but because Trump has perverted America's intelligence capabilities, firing capable leaders, installing dupes, and turning the entire apparatus inward to target his domestic challengers. Instead of warning us about Iran's capabilities to withstand our initial aerial assault, our intelligence assets were busy looking for ways to indict the Sovereign Poverty Law Center. Instead of assessing Russia's intentions and capabilities to expand the Ukraine war, they're looking at Gavin Newsom's wife. Trump's first appointment as the director of national intelligence personally oversaw a domestic operation to seize voting records in Georgia. Illegal, I might add. His new DNI has zero experience with intelligence. Zero. But he does have a track record of abusing government power to go after Trump's enemies lists. My God. He's been on the job 1 week. He's already firing staffers he thinks aren't, compliant enough. And look, leaders around the world see this, and they know that despite our ability to blow things up, we are a threat now principally to ourselves. Right on cue, to bring it home, today, as you and I are talking, on the National Mall in our nation's capital, fencing has been erected to strictly control the movement of Americans. Armed troops are patrolling, double the number of National Guard there recently were. And loudspeakers are warning visitors not to loiter. That's in America. That's in our capital. The threat is real, and it is here. To talk about all of this, I have a fabulous show today. I was able to record a bunch of it earlier in the week. That's what, the availability of the guests were. You're going to hear from two great reporters. You're going to hear from a real scholar of the law and the Supreme Court, and you're going to hear, and I'll be back live with you at 3, and we'll pick up from there, and I won't tip off what that's going to be. That, however, is going to be very much fun. So stay tuned. Great show, and we'll be back in just a sec.
You're listening to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820.
All right, everybody. I'm joined again, and very happy to be joined again by Jennifer Bendry, who is the senior politics editor at the Huffington Post. These days, that means she is covering a 3-ring circus with the animals, the clowns, and the chaos. But she is so good that she never lets the circus obscure the things that matter or should matter to the American people. Jen, thanks for joining me again.
Thanks for the kind introduction.
Well, you earned it. You've earned it. All right. So I guess I know this is very serious stuff, but I mean, this week, what you're covering feels very much like farce to me. What a week. In the rarest of acts, this do-nothing Congress passed bipartisan legislation that would have actually done some good for America. And it would have been great politics for the Republicans to campaign on. It was a bipartisan bill that would begin to address the housing crisis in America. And they set up the stage for the signing ceremony. What happened?
Well, what happened is that Trump messed it all up for himself. This was such a great optics. It was such great optics for everybody because housing affordability is such a big issue right now nationwide. And this was a bipartisan bill, which is rare these days, that was ready to be signed into law. They had the chairs set up. They had the ribbons and the signing table and members of Congress ready to go and be seen doing something. And Trump bagged at the last minute because he decided that he wanted to, he didn't want to support that. He didn't want to sign this into law until Congress agreed to pass his bill, the SAVE Act, which is, simply put, is like a voter suppression bill. And it doesn't have the votes to pass, even in a Republican-led Congress. The Senate simply doesn't have the votes for it. It's a terrible bill. It's clearly just meant to make it harder for people to vote. And Trump has been insisting on tying this bill to any bill that's going to pass now. So he threw the bipartisan housing ceremony and bill out the window at the last minute and said, nope, we're not going to sign that yet. We got to deal with the SAVE Act. And it was so last minute that there's footage of Republican members of Congress showing up to go sit in the chairs at the event who still didn't realize that it was called off. And people were ready for a win. And it was like, what is the expression? Stealing
defeat from the jaws
of victory. Yeah. I mean, it
well,
was
like
such
you
a
did
ramp.
Okay, so how are the members of Congress dealing with him pulling the rug out from under them? I mean, the last time they had a huge bipartisan bill, Biden was president, and they passed a bipartisan immigration reform bill, and Trump tanked that too. But here he's tanking something, and he wasn't even president, and he tanked it. But here, at the last minute, they passed this law. I assume they thought he was going to sign it, and then he doesn't. They must be. They're not. They're human beings. No matter what you think of their politics, they must be angry.
They're pissed. Of course, they're pissed. They're all looking at their re-election campaigns coming up. Like, there's a distinct moment on Capitol Hill when you can feel the tides change when lawmakers shift into re-election mode. Like, people start getting haircuts. They start dyeing all their gray hair brown or like off red, like weird shades of dark colors to look really good.
Really? That really happens?
Absolutely. Every 2 years you see it.
Oh my God.
It's hilarious. Like, that is a story to do in its own right. But we're entering that season of nice haircuts and hair dyes, and they're pissed because they are increasingly looking for things to be able to show their voters that they have accomplished. And this was a great optics moment and a substance moment. I mean, it was a good bill. It is a good bill. It helps people with housing. So yeah, they're mad.
They had this victory, and now any Democrat running against any of these Republicans can show that video and say, by kissing the president's backside all these years, this is what it's come to.
Well, here's the thing. Go ahead.
Nope. Forgive me. You go.
Okay. Well, I was going to say that the thing about this is, yes, this was like a forced error, and everybody's mad about it. And the reality is, if the president doesn't sign this, it will eventually become law without his signature if it sits out long enough. And there's no reason to. Yeah. And he doesn't. There's no reason to think I think he supports it. In fact, he said he supports it. So it's not even about the merits of the bill. It's about trying to shove this voter suppression bill into something else that's moving and trying to get that passed first before anything else can get done. So it's just like a chip, he's just using this bill as leverage to try to get his way on something else. But the other thing he wants, which is the voter bill, doesn't have the votes to pass, no matter what he does. So it's just like a mess.
Well, so after that, Trump met with the Senate Republicans. How did that go?
Not great. I was there. He met with them for lunch, and you could hear yelling outside. And when they came out, there was a series of Republican senators being very tight-lipped, saying like one sentence about how their lunch meeting went. Some were just sarcastic and said, "Oh, it was a great show of unity, Republican on Republican love." And then, reporters would say, "Are you joking?" And then they would just look at you with like flat expression. What ended up happening was that Senator Bill Cassidy, a Republican from Louisiana, got into a screaming match with Trump about the Iran war. And it was a very loaded debate, or not even debate, it's just a yelling match, because Trump tanked Bill Cassidy's reelection plans. He endorsed Bill Cassidy's Republican challenger in the Louisiana primary, and then Bill Cassidy lost his primary. So Bill Cassidy doesn't have a Senate job after November because of Trump. And then Trump is mad because Bill Cassidy voted earlier this week to join Democrats on a bipartisan, basically a rebuke of Trump's war in Iran. So they both had they were just mad at each other, and they came in there and they yelled at each other, and then they all came out. And I think that apart from the yelling match they had, it sounded like from other Republicans, the main thing that Trump said in there is he wants the SAVE Act to pass, which is that voter suppression bill. So this is the thing on his mind. And then the question is, why is he so determined to pass this bill that doesn't have the votes to pass? Well, he wants to make it harder for people to vote in November because, I mean, if you look at polling and voting patterns throughout his second term, you can see that Democrats are winning a lot of things. So if he can make it, if you just connect dots, he's trying to make it harder for Democratic voters to vote.
He doesn't want anybody to vote ever. He just doesn't believe in elections now that he's won. He wants to be there. And he is what people have said about him. He's an autocrat, he doesn't believe in our democracy. But that aside, like the Republicans in the room, that's a big thing to put aside. But are they now, they got to be angry about Cassidy. They got to be angry about, they liked the Texas Republican senator that lost and in a primary to a felon. He wasn't convicted, but a man who is a criminal, whether he was convicted or not, down there in Texas. So the Senate, this Republican boys club that's the Senate, are they like going to look out for each other and begin to distance themselves from Trump? Or are they going to leave that only to the ones who aren't coming back?
We'll see. So far, as you mentioned, John Cornyn in Texas lost his Republican primary because Trump helped to support his challenger.
Ken Paxton.
Bill Cassidy's out. That's two incumbent Republicans who just lost their seats because of Trump. There's a real sense in the Senate of you stand by incumbents. They stick by each other. That's a thing in there. And so to see the president and leader of their own party tanking now two of their colleagues, there is real anger in there. But then you have to throw into that there's also real fear of Trump in there. And so there's this awkward balancing act. Go ahead.
Some of them aren't up for reelection for 4 more years. Mm-hmm. Right? There's the ones that are up now. I kind of get it. Sure. Although now their primary's over, but I get it. But then there's some that won't be up until Trump is gone. They can't possibly be afraid of him. He will be gone in 4 years.
They're all afraid of him. There's a handful that are less afraid, but they are so afraid of crossing him and the wrath that he could, in theory, bring on them. Not to mention, you can't ignore the layer of this. There's a huge amount of cowardice going on right now in the Senate, but there is another layer of fear of retribution in terms of I know there's people they're threatened all the time physically. They get death threats, they get threats of violence against them or their families. I mean, this is now a normal thing in there.
Be clear about where those threats are coming from. Because I don't want, when we talk about the Republicans getting death threats, I don't want people to take from this that Democrats, that the left are calling their office and leaving death threats. That's not what the evidence is. It's coming from.
It's people who, I mean, this is just a blanket statement. I'm not talking about any one particular member right now, but it is a known thing that lawmakers, Democrats, and then Republicans who cross Trump bring on a wrath of hate from social media, from, other ways of communicating with their offices, of threats. And there's always upticks after somebody goes very public and refutes Trump in some way. There's a wave of threats that lots of lawmakers get. And I know, like Senator Murkowski from Alaska, for example, she's talked about this in the past, about how she breaks with Trump on a number of things. She's easily like the boldest Republican in there who's willing to break from him. Mm-hmm. And she's absolutely brought on a lot of threats. I know Tom Tillis, who's leaving, Senator Tom Tillis from North Carolina, he's not running for re-election. And he's been acting now like newly liberated in there. He's much more freewheeling in the way he talks. He's much more pleasant to talk to. And he's unbound by the same things now because he's not running anymore.
Yeah, so he's probably having a good time for the first time since he was elected.
Well, he's just much more vocally outraged at things. He will say how angry he is, but there's like this tension in there, and you can feel it when you're there. It sucks. I mean, I've covered the Senate for a long time, like 20 years now. And, there's always fighting in there. There's always party tensions and intra-party tensions and issue debate. I mean, there's always tension, right? But it's just different these days. There's people who are terrified of Trump. They're too afraid for their own political careers to cross him if they're Republicans. And then Democrats are there too. They're all in the minority now. And, some of them speak up and some don't as much, but they can't really do anything right now. They can do like some things, but they don't control the House or the Senate or the White House. So it's this weird time of like Trump having a hold on all the levers in D.C. and you can feel things slipping away from him right now in various elections around the country. But it's still kind of at the heart of how this place is run right now.
So while the rest of the country sees what you see, that the country is finished with Donald Trump, we're done with him, we're done with Trumpism. Every single election, the people who are holding to Trump are so far not faring very well. I mean, there are going to be some districts he's going to win, of course. It's but it looks like the handwriting's on the wall here. But in Washington, in the Capitol, in the Imperial Center, all eyes are on the emperor and they don't see what's going on in the country.
Well, I think that's like a very black and white statement. I think there's nuance around that.
Good.
And I mean, for example, this week there were a couple votes that were good to see and then embarrassing to see in the same week. I think it was on Monday or Tuesday. The Senate voted on a resolution, so basically this was a concurrent resolution. I won't bog you down in details.
The concurrent resolution means it's not law, right?
It's just like an expression of how they feel. Okay.
Yep.
The House and Senate, as of this week, both passed a concurrent resolution saying we're done with this war in Iran. We don't want you to do it anymore without coming to us for approval. And it passed both chambers with Republican support. So that's a big deal just on the messaging front. It doesn't change any laws, but it matters that they said something.
Yep, it does.
Fast forward to Wednesday, 2 days later, Trump was so mad about that vote that didn't change any laws. It was just Congress expressing its anger at Trump over the Iran war, with a handful of Republicans in each chamber saying they don't like what he's doing. He was so mad about that. And he went into that lunch with Senate Republicans still mad about it, that later that night at 10:30 p.m. on a Wednesday night, after their lunch earlier in the day, the Senate held another vote on another separate bill about the Iran war. and voted it down on purpose to say, like, see, we support you in Iran. Like, sorry about that other vote where we said we don't. Now
No,
I
didn't know that.
Now we're passing this other bill that, well, we're going to bring up this other bill that's just sitting there and not moving just so we can vote it down and so we can prove to you that we stand with you. And it was pathetic. And what was the most pathetic thing about it was that on Monday or Tuesday, when they passed that other one, the first one that was like bipartisan, passed both chambers, was a rebuke of Trump, 4 Senate Republicans voted for it. And that was the key. So now fast forward to the second vote they took late Wednesday night at 10:30 p.m. when no one's watching. Those 4 Republicans, 2 of them stayed the same. They said, yes, we want to rebuke you on Iran. That was Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski. They held the same votes. Bill Cassidy, the one who screamed at Trump earlier in the day about Iran, flipped his vote. He voted no on this resolution. And then the 4th Republican was Rand Paul, the libertarian from Kentucky. He voted present. And it's like, what are you doing? This is just one little example of how things are in there right now. They're just so scared of him that within 2 days, they took this entirely meaningless vote just as a show vote to make Trump happy. It's pathetic. It's pathetic. And they did it at 10:30 at night when no one's watching, except, reporters who are there. But but it's like, are you kidding me? Like, what are we doing here?
That is a great question, what they're doing there. Okay, so I want to turn to, oh my God, the press releases now look like his social media posts.
Which one are you referring to?
Well, I take your pick, but I mean, you wrote about one. Talk about the one you wrote about, or it was on your social medias. Sorry.
Are you talking about the reflecting pool?
Sure.
Well, the reflecting pool here in DC is like, it's just this ridiculous ongoing saga that is like Trump. I mean, I assume people listening know that the drama around the reflecting pool, that it's a mess right now. And it's because of a shoddy job that a contractor did in trying to repaint the bottom of the reflecting pool blue.
And maybe it's because he drove over it with his motorcade.
Well, what appears to have happened is that, he wanted to paint the bottom of the reflecting pool, quote unquote, America flag blue, like that shade of blue. Prior to now, no one's ever painted the bottom of the reflecting pool since it was built. But Trump came in, drained the pool, had them put this paint over it. And then they drove the motorcade over it and then filled it back up. Filled it back up with water, and then a combination of factors, it sounds like. I don't think you can just blame the paint in the pool because it's been really hot and different things create algae. But a combination of factors made worse by this blue paint coating made algae explode in the pond and turned it really horrible green. And then the paint peels on the bottom, the paint coating on the bottom of the reflecting pool started peeling up, and it's been floating in chunks in the water that's now like a murky green. It looks horrible. And so people are going there and taking pictures, and, it's all over the news here as like, what a disaster. It was like a $14 million no-bid contract that Trump gave to someone who works for a company that has supported Trump. So it's all very shady. But now Trump is insisting it's been the reason that the pool is a mess has become mysterious vandals came in the dead of night and took knives and cut apart this blue paint coating on the bottom of the reflecting pool because they don't like Trump. And they also came and dumped stuff in the water to make it have algae because these mysterious vandals.
Because why not, right? Yeah, why not?
It's so insane.
So Jen, wait, he's been doing this, saying this on social media for a while, crazy stuff like he does all night in social media. And by the way, on the other side, social media has been hysterically funny about this. I saw somebody call it the reflecting pool is now called the Strait of Warm Ooze.
That's disgusting.
But given that the Strait of Hormuz is his other problem,
right. Yeah.
Very funny. Right. So Trump on social media is his own category of disaster. But this press release that he says radical lunatics deface America's reflecting pool, and President Trump was right again, in parentheses. And then it's the same kind. It's like he wrote it himself with all those capital letters and all that weird stuff.
Mm-hmm. I mean, he probably did write it himself. And in that particular press release, he also had all these things linked out in it to prove that he was right, that this was the result of vandals with knives and box cutters cutting apart the paint coating in the dead of night in the reflecting pool. I mean, it's so insane. But his press release, his official White House press release, has multiple links in it saying, all these people lying about what's going on. And every single link in his official press release is to a major news outlet story that debunks all of his lies, like the Associated Press, NBC, CNN, PBS News. They're fully reported stories explaining how what Trump is saying is nonsense. And then he's linking out to them in this White House press release saying he was right again about vandals. And it's just, on a surface level, you have to laugh because otherwise you'll just cry at the state of everything. But it is just one more little thing in this long series of disturbing, infuriating, signs of someone who's deeply unwell in the White House.
Well, let me ask you about. I hadn't thought about this until right now, and you're talking about the links. So he's linked out to real reporting of what's going on, and the press release is saying they're wrong, I'm right. Does this, given the habits of this administration, you could also read this press release as a threat, the people I've linked to are fake news, and I'm going to have my dog at the oh God, his name just went out of my head. The commission that looks at media, at certainly broadcast, go after you, which is what he's done.
I mean, at this point, maybe he will, maybe he won't. He's already. It's become so farcical and so predictable that it's yep, there he goes again. And what are you going to do? He just says things that aren't true and then doubles down and triples down. And if you still,
but then he sends his Justice Department to tell reporters you have to come testify before a grand jury about your sources, or he sends the FBI to go raid their houses. I mean, the consequences when he does this stuff are very real.
They are real. They are real. And when things actually make it to a court, they are dismissed. And it's nonsense.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right.
So you have to wonder, for me, as one reporter in DC, you can get caught up in this stuff. And there's many things to say about these kinds of things. I think it's also important to step back and not get too, you have to follow those things, but also you have to step back and follow what he's actually doing in the meantime. What is he doing on this, more quietly as he's making a big scene about the reflecting pool? Because he's certainly trying to fill the airwaves with little things, not little things, but things that are, distractions from things like, let's say, the Epstein investigation or the Iran war, or the bigger picture things that are real and are still happening and are terrible.
Oh, you mean inflation?
Or inflation or affordability, all the big things that people who aren't watching the news, who aren't journalists in DC are just trying to live their lives and, pay their bills and raise their families. What's happening with inflation? What's happening with gas prices? How much is food at your grocery store right now? Those things.
Well, what is he doing? What is he doing about those things?
Nothing.
Nothing. So
No.
the things that Americans care about the most, he's doing nothing.
I mean, I can only speak from where I'm standing. What I see him doing is continuing. I mean, the Iran war is still going after months of him saying it was over. And just this week, the White House formally asked Congress for another $67.1 billion to continue the war in Iran. That was just like 2 days ago. That's a supplemental spending request from Congress to from the White House to Congress. That is not what you do when you are ending a war. So that's a little detail that kind of slid through this week. Oh,
did they call it a war when they asked for the money? Jen, did they call it a war when they asked for more money?
Well, there's a name for the Iran war, like an official Operation something something.
Oh, I see. So they requested more money for Operation something something to continue.
Yes. So we need, and there's a lot of bureaucratic speak in this very official letter from the White House to Congress. But yeah, they're saying, military operations for Operation something something. But it's those are the kinds of things that I think I will say for me, I have to make sure to watch as other things like the reflecting pool drama is, exploding, because those are the things that are less flashy, but they're much bigger and more damaging to everyone.
Yes, a little harder to understand than ruining reflecting pool, but yes.
Yeah,
so let's stay with that one for a minute. Yeah, let's stay with the Iran war request. So that request came. Will Congress hold hearings? Who will be the witnesses? What's the timeline? The Defense Department appropriation, I think he asked for more money than ever by a lot for the Defense Department. This is on top of $1 trillion plus we would be spending on defense. There are going to be no Democratic votes, and the Republicans, 2 of them still, but 4 of them in the light of day, said we're done with this war. What's going to happen to this?
Well, the $67.1 billion request, I mean, in Congress speak, that was like a supplemental spending request. And what that just means is, hey, we want some more money for this separate thing from our regular spending bills. And it's $67 billion for the Iran war. So that is it's going to have to be a bill that they put together that goes through the House Appropriations Committee, and then it goes through the Senate Appropriations Committee, just like other bills. It's just a separate bill that they want passed for more money for Iran. So, yeah, there will be hearings, and it will be a test of Republicans' willingness to say no. I assume most will. I mean, we'll see how it plays out. They just sent the letter this week, so there's finally a price tag publicly being put to what they're doing, because they've been trying to hide that this whole time. And that's going forward. They said in May that they had spent like $29 billion on the war already, and a lot of people said that was a very low estimate. So this is expensive, what's happening kind of quietly on the sidelines in Congress. So we'll see. I mean, you have to see if Republicans are willing to put this bill together and pass it. And they know, this is what's interesting, because here we are in June. And like I said, the haircuts and the hair dyes are starting to happen. The people are getting ready to look good at home and talk about all the good stuff they did. They also recognize universally that the Iran war is extremely unpopular nationally in both parties, unpopular. And Trump's popularity is in the toilet, too. So now is the question, at what point do you put your own reelection, your deep desire for reelection, ahead of what the president wants? And this is going to be a regular test between now and November, because people are not going to want to be saddled, tied to a very unpopular war and an incredibly unpopular president in many places. So
I guess the question is, how afraid of him are they? Right.
They're very afraid of him, and some will certainly still embrace him. But many who are, the deep red districts around the country, they're going to stick with him. But in the lighter red areas and in the purple areas, what are they going to do? Because people are pissed. People don't like paying more than $4 a gallon for gas or however much groceries have gone up, or being scared about, where we're going to go. Are their kids going to have to start fighting in a war overseas? I mean, people don't want that.
No, not at all.
So we'll see. I mean, this is increasingly going to be a tension point.
So we've talked about the Senate and this, and let's talk about the House for a minute. Well, maybe only for a minute. But I mean, like they're gone again. They're out of town. But I mean, I think they've worked like 4 minutes this year. What do you? I don't even know how to ask this question. Like, he's been there for. Who is Mike Johnson? I mean, like, he's a mystery to me.
I mean, he's a conservative House Speaker who has like a 1 vote margin.
Is he good at being a House Speaker? I mean, and having a 1 vote margin is an enormously difficult task. But he hasn't really. I mean, the rescission bill, maybe he got. It's hard to. He says things that are odd. Is he being successful in that job?
I mean, it's a strange time to ask that question because
right.
It's just general disarray all the time. But I mean, he still has his job. And if you remember a couple of years ago, there was a very embarrassing period for House Republicans where they couldn't elect a speaker for themselves.
Right, and then they couldn't keep one.
Yep, they fought and they fought and they fought. They finally put in Kevin McCarthy a couple of years back after it's like 11 rounds of rejecting him. It was a huge mess that they created. So Mike Johnson, as soon as he got into the job, he has kept his job. So I think he has somehow been able to like thread that needle of managing his far right faction with his sort of somewhat right faction with his moderate faction, which the moderate faction is pretty small. But he has somehow today, he still has his job, so that's one measure. And you don't hear Trump going off on him anymore. So, I mean, depending on how you define success, he's doing a good job. He still has his job, and people aren't yelling at him publicly every day. Wow. But he's kind of low key.
Yep. And the House is, but they've been hiding a lot this year. And that's, I guess, maybe they always do.
Well, it's an election year, and now
they have to,
in the House, they're up every 2 years. The senators, at least, they're up every 6 years. So for some members of Congress, it's like you're running for re-election the moment you get elected because there's tight races.
Yep.
But yeah, the House, a couple of Republicans in there are. I will say there's a number of House Republicans worried about losing their seats. And if you follow like the national, like the Cook's Political Report or Larry Sabato's Crystal Ball, these are both like nonpartisan groups that follow and track ratings for every single congressional district and Senate race. So if you follow those, which I look at fairly often, everything's leaning to Democrats. Things like races that are in the middle, historically, like purple districts, they're all leaning now to blue everywhere. Yeah. Obviously some are not, but many are. And so you've got a lot of very nervous House Republicans right now because there is a wave happening nationally where Democrats are just winning.
Right, because we don't like what they're doing. We do not like what the guys in power are doing with the power they've got. Don't like it at all. Yeah.
It is unpopular. And also there's within the Democratic Party, there's like an intra-party fight happening right now where just this week there were Democratic primaries in New York and in Maryland, and there was a wave of more lefty candidates in the Democratic race winning. And in New York, for example, a Democratic Socialist candidate backed by Mayor Mamdani defeated a 5-term Democratic congressman who's the chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus.
Yep.
And that was, that was a surprise, and it's part of a trend. There were at least 2 other Democratic Socialist candidates, I think. Certainly there were 3 other backed by Mamdani in New York who defeated Democrats. So there's something going on
I think there are two things going on at the same time. It's very confusing. One is change in the Democratic voters are tired of the let's make a deal politics that you normally engage in when you have a two-party system and both parties are legitimate and you go to Congress and you try and get the best deal you can and you make those compromises. But the Republican Party has broken that mode, and some Democrats were still in that mode. And the Democrats
right.
voters are saying, we're done with that. Let's make a deal is over. We need people who will just get stuff done and are not going to be fooled into playing let's make a deal when that game is over. But the other thing that's happening, yep, and the other thing is generational. You know, we just the baby boomers are being pushed off the stage, and a younger generation is coming. And those two things are not identical, but people are confused about what, you know, which did the older guy who's been there for 5 terms, was that, you know, chairing an important caucus, was he ushered off the stage because of his politics for a more lefty politics, or was he ushered off the stage because of a generational shift? It's very hard to know which is which right now.
I think that's true. I think those are both happening together, and there is overlap in the Venn diagram, but
yes,
they're related and separate. But it is just watching from my perch. You know, I see it when we covered primary races. You can see these patterns emerging in different states. And there's always, you know, it's not every race, but there's clearly within the Democratic Party a hunger for more of a fight. And like you said,
absolutely, absolutely,
and not treating the current, as you said, not treating the what it is to be a member of Congress as, well, I'll make some proposals and then you on the other side make proposals and then we'll come together and then we will make a deal. Like that feels
you cannot have a deal.
Happening.
You cannot make a deal with a bad partner, and the other guys are bad partners now. And so from the outside, we're just saying, we get it. We know who you are. We're going to have it. We need a different kind of politics. Let me ask you about two more sort of other issues that are bubbling around there. There's still a push for all the Epstein files that he's still hiding. And the man charged with protecting Donald Trump from exposure for what's in those files is, of course, Attorney General or Acting Attorney General Blanche. And now that he is Trump's nominee to officially hold that job, I want to get your sense of whether, you know, the Epstein cover-up, the Broadview 6 scandal, the slush fund deal, the increasingly documented lies DOJ is telling in court will be enough to keep him from ever having that job.
Well, I mean, it depends on Senate Republicans, doesn't it? And
yeah, that's why I'm asking you. You know him better than I do.
I mean, the short answer is I don't know right now. I need to see him in his hearing. He needs to give they're going to use his confirmation hearing as a forum for bringing up everything you just said. Obviously, Democrats are going to bring up all of those things relentlessly to make him
be a bloodbath,
to highlight how bad he is.
Yep.
But then the question is, like, that handful of Republicans, like, there will be a lot of eyes on Bill Cassidy, for example, the Louisiana Republican who got knocked out of his race by Trump. Is he going to be more free now to just be more critical of Trump and of his attorney general pick, just straight up critical now in public because he has nothing to lose? Is Tom Tillis, who's not running for reelection, is he going to be more honest about, like, his problems with this? And then there's, like, Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins, who, you know, Susan Collins is up for reelection, and as you know, I'm sure you know about, against Graham Plattner, the oysterman in Maine who has a colorful background. So there, like, all this stuff overlaps with who's up for reelection and where they stand in their primaries. So we'll see. I mean, there's only a handful of Republicans that reporters on the Hill are going to really be watching. We're not really. Okay.
Because the base of the party is going to stick with whatever terrible nominee there is, except for maybe
the core of the Senate Republican Conference is going to stick with Trump,
except for maybe Bill Pulte or whatever his name is, Pulte.
Mm-hmm.
Like they showed a little bit of spine there.
Yeah, some people really don't like him because he has a lot of problems I mean, the question is, well, what are they going to do about it? And that's always been where they've kind of become
right, because he could serve without being officially there, and so, but he's firing people. I mean, we're talking about the man who is in charge of our national security apparatus, who Donald Trump put there, even though he has zero experience in any of the issues that you are by law required to have to hold that post. And the Senate could get him out of that post, actually, but they won't. And he's firing all kinds of people because really we don't care about foreign national security questions anymore. We don't care about foreign intelligence anymore. If we did, we would have known that they would have shut the Straits of Hormuz in Iran. What we care about is can we turn our intelligence apparatus against Americans, against Antifa? Can we indict the Southern Poverty Law Center? Can we investigate a voter registration group in Ohio? Can we go after Americans we don't like with our national security apparatus? It's entirely illegal. The Trump administration is doing it, and this henchman is the guy he wants there to do it, and the Senate's going to let him do it. Do I have that close to right?
I mean, all I can say is that there are Republicans who have problems with him, and
but won't do anything about it.
Well, that's always the question. I mean, it would take a handful of them to vote with all Democrats to tank a nominee, and it's always a question. Well, do they have it in them this time? And the answer traditionally has been no.
Yeah. Well, and this guy's not even a nominee. He's just put there in a so-called temporary basis, and temporary lasts through the next election. So you'd have to do something extraordinary to get rid of him.
Yes, and there's just not the will in the Senate Republican Conference to do that. They don't have the collective spine to stick up for, why are they even in the Senate? Why are you a senator? What are you trying to do here? Like, I feel like there's just a lot of like, I am here, I want to keep my job, and I don't want to anger Trump. Like that is.
I can't believe I'm going to say this. I just can't believe it, but I miss Senator Byrd. I'm dating myself. But West Virginia Senator Byrd, I never agreed with him about anything until the vote for the Iraq War, and he spoke about what the Senate is and the prerogatives of the Senate and the duty of senators. And I just want to replay that to every member of the Republican Senate every day. Jen, how do people find your work? It's fabulous, and we are out of time. So tell people, on which platforms they should hunt for you so that they can know what's going on.
Well, I'm easy to find. I work for the Huffington Post, and I'm on Blue Sky. I have an account on Twitter, too, even though that's a dark and terrible place that I do not recommend going into. But I do have an account there that I put my stories on. So, yeah, I'm easy to find. Usually come find me on Blue Sky.
All right, Jen, thank you so much for your time. It's always great.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You're listening to WCPT 820.
Welcome back to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820.
All right. I am so happy to be joined again by Lisa Graves. She is the founder and executive director of an important national investigative watchdog organization, True North Research. She has done so much to uncover the dark money corruption of our politics and to document the carnage to our democracy done by that obnoxious anti-democratic priestly caste known as the Roberts Court. In fact, she's written about it. Hold up that book for everybody. Read this book. Lisa, where do they get it?
You can get it anywhere you buy books, and we also have an audio version of it. So you can get the audio if you prefer your books on tape or on audio.
And for those of you who are listening to this on the radio, the book is Without Precedent.
Yes, Without Precedent: How Chief Justice Roberts and his accomplices rewrote the Constitution and dismantled our rights. A project that is ongoing every single day now.
Every single day. You and I always talk about the Roberts Court. And I think we'll get to it because why not before we're done? But I wanted to start somewhere else today with you because you thought it was important a year ago to write a report on what you called the infrastructure of autocracy in America. And I thought it was important then, and I think it's important now. So I wonder if you would tell everybody a little bit about what that infrastructure is, and then let's talk about whether it got stronger or weaker during the year. Like where are we now?
Well, that is a great question. So I wrote with my colleague, my deputy director, Alyssa Bowen, a primer
Hmm.
on authoritarian infrastructure in the US. It's available on our website at truenorthresearch.org. And this primer is about the infrastructure. And I started this actually in 2024 before the election. I had been doing a lot of work around Project 2025, the Heritage Foundation operation that Trump tried to distance himself during the campaign, even though he was clearly instrumentally involved in it. And then immediately he began implementing it on day one, literally hour one after being sworn in. And so this discussion of the infrastructure um, evolved or devolved because I pushed off releasing it immediately at the beginning of last year because I needed to take into account what the combination of this private sector and nonprofit sector role in this authoritarian push would be doing in conjunction with an executive branch and a legislative branch controlled by the same party and a U.S. Supreme Court controlled by the same party. And so, in essence, Republican appointees or electeds in all three branches of the federal government who have been advancing this authoritarian agenda in a lot of ways that I think people were reluctant to call authoritarian as it has been coming on. Some people will do commentary, and some reporters will call it conservative. There's nothing conservative about it. It's radical, reactionary. It is a deep and wide effort to regress American society. It is not conservative. It conserves nothing. It destroys things, and so that's what this report is about. It's about where are these forces arrayed, who's funding them, how does this relate to oligarchy and tyranny, how do we contend with the multiple constitutional crises that we're facing.
Okay, in the last 30 seconds of that, you asked about four questions that are enormously big questions, right? So,
Yes.
like, what are so we've got this. First, talk about how the private sector, the private sector is probably the wrong word here. Well, I'm going to add it. The private sector, the nonprofit sector, the right wing nonprofit sector, and the government are working together to, as you say, regress our society.
Well, I think this has been coming on for a while. There obviously, since the 1970s, has been this real resurgence in the assertion of power and the demands of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and some of the enormous companies that are the primary funders of the chamber, along with new emerging actors, predominantly in the tech sector. And so back in 1971, as you and I have discussed before, Edwin, there was a memo that was written by Lewis Powell. He was a tobacco lawyer who wrote what is now known as the Powell Memo to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, in which he made, I mean, laugh out loud, hysterical, ridiculous claims, including the claim that no one in America has less influence than the American businessman in
Yeah,
1971. When it was
insane.
ridiculous then, but it's a sign of the type of hyperbole, the type of paranoia, the type of extremism that memo embodies. When in fact, what had happened was that during the 60s into the 70s, and I would say even starting in the 50s, there was, the federal government became more responsive to the concerns of the American people. There were numerous legislative initiatives on the tax rate to make sure that corporations and CEOs were paying their fair share. There were
How
innovations like
dare they?
yeah,
How
yeah.
dare
How
Congress
dare
do
they?
such a thing?
Exactly. There are
How dare
innovations like the GI Bill to send our service members to college. There were, efforts to help people buy housing. There were efforts to redress racial discrimination, discrimination against Black
they?
Americans. There was Brown versus Board of Education, the Civil Rights Act, the Civil Rights Movement. There was
How
a
dare they?
how dare they, right? There was a growing environmental movement in the aftermath of Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring. There was a massive oil spill off the coast of Santa Barbara that instigated the very first Earth Day. There were demands
Hmm.
by the American people for the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, and efforts to address the massive pollution that the petrochemical industry was putting into our waterways, leading to
Hmm.
rivers being like the Cuyahoga being on fire. So there was a Congress, a Democratic Congress that was responsive to many of those concerns. And there were presidents, Republican and Democratic, who were signing those bills into law. And that was ticking off regressive people like Lewis Powell, who not only was he a tobacco lawyer who tried to stop labeling of the carcinogenic impact of smoking tobacco, but he had also spearheaded the efforts on the part of the city of Richmond, the former capital of the Confederacy, and advised the government of Virginia basically on how to get around implementing Brown versus Board of Education as the advisor to the school board in Virginia. So he was not an aggressive, overt, white sheet wearing segregationist, but he was a segregationist in the activities that he did. And in fact, John Conyers and the NAACP testified against the confirmation of Lewis Powell to the U.S. Supreme Court. But anyway, so
Hmm,
that
I
so
didn't know
that's
that.
what
That's interesting.
yeah.
That's
So that
interesting.
was what
And
that's
yet,
what was happening.
humans are complicated. Humans are really complicated. I mean, Lewis Powell also was one of the biggest advocates of, the private sector funding lawyers for people who couldn't afford them for themselves. People are complicated and strange, but I think you have it pegged
Yeah.
absolutely fairly. But this is I think a what do they call it in biology when two organisms end up with the same features, but they develop them
Oh, yes.
apart from each other.
I don't know, but I know, but
Convergent
I don't
evolution.
know. Yes.
Convergent evolution, right? I think
Yes.
it's so because I think that this move that to capture our judiciary is
Yes.
different than what led to Trumpism in a way. Um, they both serve the same masters now, but this move since the 70s to capture the court for
Yep.
corporate and wealthy interests. We saw it. We've seen it in this current session where the rights of plain people are
Yep.
downplayed and transferred to
Yes.
corporations, and right, and we can talk about that. Um, but separate from that, but now allied with that was the uh, this other. I mean, began with abortion and some
Yep.
other things that became the path for rewriting the Republican Party into this MAGA fist that we now have.
Well, that's right. And when I began with Pell because, in fact, what he is saying is that CEOs need to spend money to influence universities, to influence the courts, specifically targeting the courts, to create new,
Yeah,
think tanks because they couldn't control academic independent research at the time, and to really dominate the media and try to push their um, what they were describing as a capitalistic agenda, but really was about deregulation, no regulation, less regulation, not capitalism in the sense of Adam Smith, who wrote that the mercantile class should be the least trusted in terms of our public policy because they act with the most self-interest. That was way back in The Wealth of Nations. He understood that, but it was Powell and his compatriots who were pushing that forward. And as you point out, to be fair, because he had been the president of the American Bar Association and the ABA was supporting the rights of poor people to have access to our courts, he does get some credit for that, but I will give credit to the founding fathers who said that you have a right to
That's
counsel.
right.
And
I don't want to
yeah,
overplay that. I just note that people are complicated.
yes,
They can
they are.
be bad and still complicated.
Yes, yes. But then as you point out, this, Nixon, at that time, he signed into law these measures on, to address
Yep.
the financial crises at the time, to try to have some price controls to protect the economy. He signed into law these environmental protections, including the creation of the Environmental
The
Protection
EPA.
Agency. And so they like, speaking of people who are complicated, this is someone who was
Yeah.
corrupt in significant ways, a craved power, sought to abuse the office of the presidency and the Justice Department to help himself. And he also signed into law some of these major environmental pieces of legislation. And during that period, we had the Supreme Court recognizing not just previously the right to access contraception, but that would include the right to access abortion. And surprisingly, most people don't realize what people don't realize is that at the time, the evangelical churches predominantly supported Roe versus Wade. It was the Catholic Church that condemned it. And but then fast forward as this Powell memo is being implemented, as the groups that it spawned, like the Heritage Foundation, came out of the Powell memo, funded by the Coors fortune out of Colorado. Paul Weyrich was leading that effort. By the early 1980s, what you have is this effort to weaponize abortion as a tool to aid the Republican Party, to help its people get elected, and to begin what they were describing as the new right. This um, this merger in some ways between this economic right wing and this religious right wing, and Paul Weyrich was at the center of that. And
It
so the
was.
movement that we're seeing today, or the effects we're seeing today, in terms of this authoritarian infrastructure, groups like the Heritage Foundation and the very regressive agenda that it has promoted through Project 2025 and more, and several other compatriots, it was born out of that Powell memo. It was seeded by super rich individuals funding these apparatus, and pushing forward to try to capture these branches of government. And part of that also was the creation of the Federal Society in 1982. Its first meeting was about Roe versus Wade, was attacking Roe versus Wade, but the precursor to the Federal Society was this so-called originalism, which was really targeting Brown versus Board of Education and trying to claim that the Supreme Court never should have issued an order desegregating the schools because there were segregated schools in DC immediately after the Civil War. So there was this originalism. Its original mission was to attack racial integration, but they quickly
Wow.
repurposed that to focus on abortion as a more divisive issue at that time.
I did not know that. That's fascinating.
Yes.
Fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. So
All
that
right. So
that investment by these billionaires, and they weren't billionaires then, they were demi-billionaires. They were, super rich people like Richard Scaife, whose fortune came from the Mellon banking fortune, the Coors
Mhm,
fortune, these brewery
mhm,
fortunes that we're now
mhm.
still seeing the legacy of by, people like Dick Uihlein, another brewery fortune, money deployed in the present term. Those individuals were seeding these types of right-wing groups over time. They grew in influence because they were a long-term investment by Charles Koch in a number of these types of
Yep.
groups, long-term investments. And then they've been joined in this most recent decade by tech billionaires who, I'm not saying they're not smart. Some of them are very smart, but they got very lucky. And sometimes if you have a lot of money, you can get lucky because you're willing to take a lot of risk because it doesn't hurt you to lose. You have capital to spare to gamble. So you make big bets and some of them pay off. And so some of these tech billionaires have become quite rich on early bets that they often from their inherited wealth to begin with that they were able to make. And they have become increasingly captured or captive to a very pernicious ideology that's anti democracy, that's
Very democratic.
pro disruption. They sort of like to think of themselves as these big disruptors when in fact they're actually people who just got pretty lucky and in some ways are pretty selfish in how they are accumulating their wealth, like Jeff Bezos, at the expense of workers who can barely survive and live in tent cities or
Mhm, mhm.
housing on wheels because they're not getting paid well. But Bezos is doing well. So you have this billionaire class that we saw show up at that inauguration, standing behind Donald Trump, basically shoulder to shoulder, because they had a lot to gain from a disruptive president, and not just someone who was
Particularly
going
one
to,
who could be bought.
yeah, someone,
And he
yeah,
hung out a sign that said, "Buy me," right?
yes,
For sale, everything.
for sale.
Yeah,
Yeah, it reminded me
yeah,
because
right.
when Scott Walker became the governor of Wisconsin, they put this big sign at the border of Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Illinois, and it said "Wisconsin is open for business," which was really
Yeah,
meaning it was open for sale. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and it took a long time to. I mean, it's this cycle coming when we
Yep.
will finally end the remnants of the gerrymander that
Yes.
happened when he
Yes.
was governor there. Okay, so that gets us to last year.
Yes.
So right, that sets us up. So now in the year that's happened, Donald Trump has consolidated more power given to him by the courts, and because he has thrown out everyone in the executive branch who disagrees with him and has actual control of all of the levers of the executive branch. So in some ways, the strongest president we've ever had. And compliant Congress continues to this day. Well, so in the year, would you say he's gotten that the autocrats are in a better position because of that consolidation, or has um, completely outside of the system we've discussed? Have Americans organized to say, you know what, we're done with you. We are now going to fight back in a way we haven't fought back in 50 years, 60 years.
Well, I think both are true. Um,
Mhm.
but also, so I bristle at the idea that he's the strongest president because it typically means a positive thing. But I think in this
No,
instance,
I don't mean a positive thing.
yes,
Just the
I
amount
know
of
you, and
power
so I
he
know you
wields.
mean in a negative. I know
Yeah.
you mean in a negative sense.
Just
Um,
negative or positive. Just we have, for whatever reason, he has more power than we have ever given a president.
yes, because we haven't given him that power. The Supreme Court,
He's
the John Roberts
well,
Court, has endowed him with powers that he does not and should not possess, that no president should possess, including the
I
right
agree with you.
to be a criminal, in essence, to be able to
Well,
engage
wait,
in criminal activity through a so-called official act. No president in our entire history has had that power, and Donald Trump has sought to assert it. And this Roberts Court, this extremist Roberts Court, has illegitimately given him that power that has made him the strongest president in U.S. history in ways that are terrible. And it has given him a
nefarious,
belief that he can do no wrong and that he can change anything at
or at
will.
least not get away with it. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. I mean, Roberts could given it twice because the Roberts Court gave it to him, but so did the Republican Congress that said to him, "Power of the purse."
Yeah.
I don't know what that means. Like war powers? Meh, at least not until after you get in a lot of trouble. We're not going to worry about that. So both the Congress and the courts have endowed this man with powers that
Unprecedented
nobody's
power.
had. And, yeah, and it's certainly shown his character.
Yeah, I agree with you, Edwin, and I think I really appreciate your putting the underscoring under Congress because for as much as these right wingers like to talk a good game about being originalist or supporting the Constitution, or even some of the names of some of the groups that were part of the insurrection that pretend to be devoted to these first principles, to our republic. In fact, they have betrayed our republic. They've betrayed our democracy because the role of Congress is to be a check on the president. And I think the founding fathers, flawed though they were, brilliant though they were, could probably not imagine a Congress that would lay down its powers in service to a king-like president, especially one who is so morally bankrupt and such a notorious liar and cheater. And I could go on with the adjectives, but the system is built on each branch preserving or asserting their power, and protecting the system of this checks and balances. And you have a court that has subordinated itself to a president. John Roberts has sought to recreate our laws, basically rescind most of the progress of the 20th century in order to go back to that robber baron era, and given a president powers that are horrifying in the modern day and would have been horrifying to the framers. And you have a Congress that is so sycophantic, so dependent on the money Trump raises through his hysterical claims and attacks and lies and deception that they can't give up. It's like that Brokeback Mountain film. I can't quit you. They can't quit his cash. And
Yeah.
some of them are afraid. They're afraid of their own constituents, that if they do not go along with Trump, they'll be threatened. They'll receive death threats. Their family will be threatened. And yet, instead of standing up to him, they cave in, and in some ways compete to be the most subservient to them. I don't think any of the framers would have imagined that Congress would give up the power of the purse the way they have allowed Trump to redirect our money to all sorts of personal projects and pet ideas, random, capricious, thoughtless, arrogant nonsense. The naming of himself, the paving over
Hang this
of
man on the
yeah,
Justice Department.
yeah, everything.
Revolting.
Um,
So this is all
yeah,
now. This is about our government. We've talked about like the think tank process of the right and how it's impacted our government. But then you had in this last year major pillars in the private sector capitulate.
yes,
Big law firms, big media companies, big universities. And that is still happening as we are speaking. Yale University is considering cutting a deal because they don't, because they don't want to have this fight. So large chunks of companies and institutions that are strong enough to stand up, their lawyers are telling them, don't bother. Let's just cut and run. Let the voters bail us out.
yeah.
Um,
The cowardice of those big institutions, the selfishness, their unwillingness to expend the capital that they have acquired in order to defend this society, rather than just capitulate to these absurd, in many instances, absurd, baseless, um, inflated, outrageous claims by Trump.
yep.
Their capitulation has been um, just
Breathtaking and
yes,
unconscionable.
yes.
But
But
shout
there
out
have
to
been people who've
Harvard.
stood up. There have been firms that have stood up. There have been institutions that have stood up.
Shout out to
And
Jenner.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
And to go to your original part of that question, people are standing up. More and
Yeah.
more people get that this authoritarian regime is off track, that it's destroying our American society, it's harming our neighborhoods and our neighbors, it's destabilizing our economy, it's helping the super rich get super richer while the rest of us struggle to, pay for medical bills and gas and groceries and the like. And you see Trump saying things like, "I love inflation," or "I don't care about affordability," because he doesn't. Like those are rare moments of truth from this
Right.
man,
Which you
right?
don't expect from him. It's shocking when he tells the truth. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
But what you see is this authoritarianism, this tyranny that is manifesting in all sorts of different ways in our society, including the chilling, of people in dissent. This effort to prosecute people for standing up and speaking out against this administration, or even taking a picture of seashells. They're throwing a Subway sandwich. There's just this extraordinary
Putting your
authoritarian.
hand in the water of a
Yeah,
reflecting pool.
yeah. It is challenging, but there's strength in numbers, and more Americans have come together, spoken out. The No King's Day protests and marches have been really, really large. You have a growing number of people organizing to try to protect our elections. You have Trump plummeting in the polls, though he has this sort of durable 1/3 ish of the population that
Mhm.
is being schooled on disinformation from these right wing media outlets. I won't call them
Yeah,
news.
now that the oil companies are going to help him by not taking windfall profits for a few weeks to lower
Yeah,
gas prices, we're going to see that core come back a little bit.
yeah, they're
But
willing to
America,
manipulate. Yeah, yeah,
but like we learned in Hungary that you can win an election that's not free and not fair
yes,
if you show
yes,
up by in big enough numbers.
yes.
Yeah.
Too big to cheat. too big to steal. So that's really, part of the mission in the months ahead is to make sure you're registered to vote and everyone you know is registered to vote, and then check again, make sure they haven't removed you from the rolls. Make sure to get to
Mhm.
the polling place or make sure your ballot is counted. Make sure that the ballots aren't seized or stolen, that people aren't intimidated. Make sure that we can get the people who are elected sworn in, notwithstanding the subservience of the Speaker of the House to doing whatever Trump wants, as if he's a captive of the compromat machine that Trump also seems to be closely tied to. Who knows? But the fact is that we have a lot of work ahead of us in the next 6 months to make sure that the election happens, that our votes are counted, and that the people who win are sworn in so that we can put some checks on this president
Yeah.
and we can help begin the process of restoring and expanding our rights.
I want to put a first off, yes to all of that. And everybody listening, yes to all of that, because this is on all of us, each of us, um, alone and together.
Yes.
So make it part of your 4th of July talk, because
Yes.
that's what the 4th of July is actually about. I want to ask you about a scenario that scares me to death. The Supreme Court, your friends, ended temporary protective status yesterday or day before yesterday, this week. Um,
Yesterday. It was just yesterday. It's crazy, but it was just
yeah,
yesterday. Yeah.
right. So 300,000 Haitians, I don't know how many people really, more than that, are now um, about to lose their driver's licenses, they're about to lose their work permits, and they're going to be hunted down like dogs by the federal government. And feel like, I mean, I lived through ICE in Chicago, and I friends and relatives who lived through it in Minnesota. And living through it means saying no to it, means standing up and showing up and turning out and protesting. And what we learned was that J.D. Vance argued that protesting means we should declare the insurrection. That's how they see that protesting. And they are not going to pull 300,000 people off the streets without Americans standing up and saying, no, you're not doing this. This is appalling, particularly when we know what those ICE flights are like, when we
Yeah.
know what those gulags that they built in our country are like. Americans aren't going to do it. And I just worry that they are going to come all out to try and get us to behave in a way that lets them go all insurrection act and, say, well, we can't have elections during this insurrection or whatever they're doing, because I don't see a bottom to these guys. Am I am I crazy? And B, what can we do about it?
Well, you're not
Not the crazy,
crazy.
not the
You're not crazy, but I think Yale Law School, among other things, should be considering whether J.D. Vance learned anything at that institution besides having the chance to meet Peter Thiel and become an acolyte of one of the most regressive billionaires in America. Because
parentheses. Peter Thiel says he's leaving the country. He's going to go live somewhere else. And I say, God, good riddance, man.
Yes.
I hope you have a great life. When you're there, let's cancel your passport. You don't need to come back. We're fine without you.
Yeah, there he is in Argentina, this guy who's gone on this ridiculous tour to claim that Armageddon or the Antichrist is, upon us, while he kisses up to
Mhm.
Donald Trump, who has violated, not that I'm keeping score, but, basically at least half of the 10 Commandments and at least one of them every single day and possibly every single hour of every single day that he's awake. But Thiel
I'm going
has
to think
said out
about
loud.
which one that is. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Thiel has said out loud that he doesn't actually believe in democracy. Doesn't think democracy works
No, he
because
doesn't.
he wants tech lords like himself who got lucky based on their investments coming out of Stanford Law School where he went to school. He
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 won't
he
be
thinks that
history's only fascist to go hide in Argentina.
no, that's exactly right. But we have to remember that Thiel is the one who staked J.D. Vance's political ambitions to become a senator in Ohio and then ultimately become the vice president of the United States. And so you have someone who is in this vice
Lisa, I have to
presidential role.
interrupt you.
What?
I
Yes.
love this kind of. I have to interrupt you, but we have blown past the deadline to
Oh
start.
no. Okay. Well, to be continued then.
And
To be continued.
to be continued. Thank you so much. And just if people are interested in your work, where do they find it?
Yes, you can find my work at truenorthresearch.org. I've got a Substack called Grave Injustice, My court reform work is at courtaccountability.org, and I have regular shows on Legal AF as part of the Midas Touch Network. You can find me on YouTube.
All right.
Edwin, a
Always
joy
love
to
talking
talk
to you.
with you anytime. Just say the word.
Welcome back to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820.
All right, everybody. I'm happy to be joined by Adam Glassfeld. You remember him. He's the editor-in-chief of All Rise News. And Adam, I wanted to just start about All Rise News because you began it when you noticed that traditional journalism wasn't doing its job in covering the judiciary, and I would say not doing the job that the moment needed in covering the judiciary. And not only did your work fill the gap, but traditional journalism has decided that you were right and that they are now following your lead, but they're also following you personally, which has got to be just an awesome feeling.
Thank you very much, Edwin. I really appreciate that. And I absolutely believed and believe now that journalism needs to meet the moment, and that journalism in particular needs to address this sense of fatalism that a lot of people are feeling, this sense of powerlessness. And I think 1.5 years into Trump's second term, we're realizing that, yes, it is possible to fight back against an authoritarian moment. Yes, just as it was possible after the 2020 election for the institutions to hold, not as an abstraction, but as people taking their power, sometimes in small administrative positions, secretaries of state, boards of supervisors from Arizona to Michigan, all using their power, all using their responsibility.
I want to say election workers on election day.
Absolutely. Yeah. Poll workers who are absolute heroes, who are facing intimidation, many of whom tragically have been intimidated from their jobs, but are still many of them are still holding strong. Many of them are still doing their civic duties. And one of the things that I think when Trump's second term began, there was this sense, this feeling of powerlessness that was quickly replaced by a feeling of civic duty.
You used this metaphor, and it stuck with me, that if Trumpism is a virus, we've now developed the antibodies.
Absolutely. That there is that civic engagement itself is an antibody response to authoritarian tendencies. That when people try to institute I'll give an example of the antibody response we've seen just this week when Trump tried to issue an executive order that would somehow give him power over elections, that would make him the arbiter of what mail-in voting counts, that the federal government compiles a database. We're seeing multiple federal judges say no. That is not our Constitution. The Constitution gives the administrative power of elections to the states, and there's a reason for that decentralized system, so that, contrary to what Trump says, it can't be rigged. And so, I think that a deep understanding of how our institutions operate, not as abstractions, but as people within those institutions, understanding the institutions, understanding their power to push back against authoritarian attempts, that is the antidote. That is the antibody response to the hopelessness that I spoke about.
Yeah, I mean, and it turns out that when you shed light on something, as you have through your reporting, Americans' attention can shift. They can start looking at this and go, wait a minute, I wasn't thinking about that. That's really important. And then our legacy media follows, and suddenly Americans are saying, wait a minute, the courts, the judicial system, this is a really important part of saving our democracy right now.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. I do think that one of the things, I've been a legal journalist, as you know, for a little more than 15 years. And I noticed, particularly when covering Trump's criminal trials, that there was a heavy investment in the outcome. And of course, that's the case. People want to know the outcome. The verdict is very much about whether justice occurs. But there's so much that's learned in the process that through the court system, particularly I'll give the example of the 2020 election again. The courts are where Trump's lies about the election were debunked. You would see people like Rudy Giuliani say there was a massive fraud, then step right into court and say they're not alleging fraud. Right. And so courts beyond...
It's where the lies go to die.
Exactly. And it's
where the lies should go to die. When they corrupt the judicial process, as we saw here in Chicago with Broadview 6, they take those lies into the courtroom. Happily, the judge knew better.
Right. And as a matter of fact, now there are multiple districts that have motions before them from criminal defendants saying, look at what happened in Chicago. Look at what happened with the Broadview 6, that this is the Trump Justice Department is not entitled to the same presumption of regularity that was given to prior Justice Departments, because we're in a new era. We're in a new time where the face of the head of state is now hanging outside of the Justice Department. And we'll see what happens. There's been a similar motion in the case of Don Lemon over in the Twin Cities. And what happened in Chicago might be just the beginning of the kind of accountability for the warping of the grand jury process in criminal cases.
They brought more than 30 cases against protesters here in Chicago. Only one has led to a conviction. A guy pled guilty, but they're going to sentencing, and the Justice Department said, we better delay sentencing because something has gone wrong. So that case may now go down too.
And that's just incredible. That's so astonishing, Edwin, because the numbers that you just described, I remember just how rare it was to see an acquittal, to see drop charges. Now, because you have the combination of a lack of competence, the combination of that with the fact that the Justice Department is losing staff left and right, and that it is beholden to a political agenda, that's a blinking red light, because that just didn't happen. If you looked at when the Justice Department, even in Trump's first term, brought a case, their track record of conviction, of it being a serious case, was much, much higher than it is now.
So we've talked a little bit about journalism, a little bit about our corrupt Justice Department. Let's put them together and talk a little bit about what happened this week with Trump's attack on the press. You want to talk about what happened in their Washington Post and Wall Street Journal?
Absolutely. Yes. Well, you had the Trump DOJ issuing subpoenas to Washington Post reporters and Wall Street Journal's reporters, and ultimately withdrawing them, presumably because both newspapers pushed back and said, this is freedom of the press. You're going to chill journalism if you make us try to compel us to testify against our sources. So, thankfully, these news organizations fought back. The Trump Justice Department folded. But this is just another red line. With the prosecution of Don Lemon and Georgia Fort, you had in that case, the Trump Justice Department tried to get subpoenas of the subscribers to their YouTube channel. A federal judge turned that down. And what surprised me, although didn't really surprise me, about that story, about the subpoenaing of Washington Post and Wall Street Journal national security reporters, was just another red line being crossed. That first, there's prosecution, there's the raiding of a home of a Washington Post reporter, and the prosecution of independent journalists, the attempt to subpoena the information about their subscribers. There just isn't a red line that this Trump Justice Department won't cross.
I was not surprised. I expect this now of them. What what I loved was they knew that they were on the verge of yet another judge quashing their subpoenas, which is now also unheard of, and happening to these guys. I just and journalism, I'm glad they're fighting back. I mean, they haven't always fought back. ABC caved, wrote Donald Trump a big check, and now he's come after them again, and they're fighting back. They're actually putting an ad on The View saying, "Hey, they want to tell us what we can say and not say on this show." That's a big change.
Right. And I would say that is happening in part because news organizations are realizing that it really doesn't help to acquiesce to Trump, that you just can't placate him. You can't, and that if they fight back, they will win. These were winnable cases when Trump went after CBS and 60 Minutes because of the interview with Kamala Harris. That was a joke of a case, but it was settled but they caved because doing so would have lubricated the deal that they wanted.
Yeah, it's revolting.
It is.
But let's talk about some actual cases. Starting with Katie Fangs, if you like, just remind everybody what she sued for, and just a little bit about that, and then I want to go back to because we had an interesting Supreme Court here, so I want to turn to that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Katie Fang just got a wonderful victory in the case that she filed for access to some of the undisclosed Epstein files, and that she made the argument that as a journalist, the failure to disclose these documents harms my ability to report. That this is that the release of these documents are mandated by the Epstein Files Transparency Act, and that she has standing because she's harmed as a journalist. She can't report on what the government is refusing to disclose. And U.S. District Judge Emmett Sullivan agreed.
I think that's amazing. Incredible. Again, this is journalists fighting back, and I just to go to what you were saying earlier about antibodies, right? This is America getting off its back and saying, well, judges are doing it, journalists are now doing it. We see it in the streets, in our protests. I think Americans are not going to let their democracy slip away without a huge fight.
I agree. And she just won an incredible victory. And as I understand it, the government was saying, she should file a Freedom of Information Act request. And the judge rejected that, saying, no, there is a law. It's called the Epstein Files Transparency Act. And because you are that he ordered them to provide an explanation for certain redactions, including redactions involving certain accused co-conspirators. So this is a major victory.
Major victory. And by the way, just everybody listening should know that the freedom of information, some of the information that she would have sought is not subject to the Freedom of Information Act. The Epstein law required them to make public things that you can't get through FOIA. So that was nonsense. All right. So Adam, let's turn to the Supreme Court, because this has been a monumental session. And I guess I want to start with the humanitarian disaster that's about to happen because of the end of temporary protected status. It's 300 and some thousand Haitians living in America that the Trump administration will be delighted to collect and to shackle and to put on planes as fast as they possibly can.
Absolutely. And if you ask some immigration advocates about this, it's 1.3 million who are protected by various TPS programs. And to take a step back here, those are 1.3 million people who have, many of them lived in the United States for decades, are part of their communities, have built their families here, and have escaped war and natural disaster. In Haiti, the Haitian context, they had been largely escaping the disastrous 2010 earthquake. So when I say people who have been here for more than a decade, those are the folks who benefited from the Haitian TPS. And the Supreme Court handed down their ruling the day after another disastrous earthquake in Venezuela. So what do we have here is, to go into the decision, you had Justice Alito, one, claiming that most of the claims aren't justiciable unless they're constitutional claims. And the real jaw dropper with the Haitian TPS challenge was, of course, they were saying that Trump has a long history of very racist statements about the Haitian community, saying that they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats, saying they're poisoning the blood of the people. You had Justice Kagan really laying out, I'm just giving two examples of a page-long itemization of racist statements. And you had Justice Alito claiming that there was a race-neutral explanation. Trump just hates the TPS program. And that if this isn't racial discrimination in the eyes of the court, what could be? And this, as you said,
we know it's not disenfranchising black voters in Alabama. That's not racist, even when they said, let's not let them vote. I mean, really. So they no longer believe that the 14th Amendment is about racism, that it protects people.
Right. And I think that was a great point that you mentioned, talking about Alabama as well, that it's a running theme, that it's defining racism away, that even when a 3-judge panel in the Alabama redistricting case found that two Trump appointees on the 3-judge panel unanimously finding that the purpose of these racially gerrymandered maps was to eliminate Black opportunity districts in Alabama. This 6-3 supermajority cannot see racism when it's staring them right in the face, when Trump is actually using the phrase poisoning the blood of our people.
You're kinder than I am. Yeah. I think they see it and they like it.
Right.
You're kinder than I am.
Right. However you interpret the supermajority's, motive, it's just not good. And we're in a very dark place when such a blatant racial discrimination is characterized as race neutral by the highest court in the land. And
so people listening should know this and be prepared, because this will lead to non-judicial actions on our streets when the government seeks to, in very short order, create chaos by arresting, locking up, and starting to fly around so they can't find their lawyers, and then fly out. Really, hundreds of thousands of people who've lived here, worked here. This is coming, and we know it's coming.
Right. And I'm seeing the antibody response starting to happen, and I'm in New York City. Mayor Mamdani has urged the Haitian community to contact immigration agencies in the city for how to react to this. But as you said, Edwin, at the end of the day, the Supreme Court pulled the rug out from under hundreds of thousands of people.
I mean, they're going to lose their ability to work legally. They're going to lose their ability to drive legally here. The federal government is going to hunt them down.
And we'll see, this may, it almost feels awful to make this point when we're talking about such life or death stakes, but I think it's going to hurt them politically as well, because they're ripping communities apart. The economies of the states where they've lived and build lives and build businesses are going to be hurt, along with the families.
Yes, but they want us to protest enough so they can call out the guards. It's called the Insurrection Act. It's what they've been hunting to do. There's no bottom to where they're going to go. On other opinions, this court has been interesting. I mean, the 14th Amendment's got a lot of people talking about what they're doing in this case, in this term. I think some of the most interesting questions are around federalism in this term, and confusing to me. They said in the Enbridge case, which matters a lot to me because I live in Chicago on Lake Michigan, and this is about a pipeline, an oil pipeline that runs under the Straits of Mackinac. So it makes me very nervous that, state law doesn't block federal lawsuits. But they also said state law claims against military contractors can proceed. I think they are confused about where they should be on federalism in this court.
Right. And that very day, you had a 7-2 ruling with Monsanto Roundup case, where you had, I believe it was Justice Jackson and Gorsuch in the dissent there, where the Missouri law that allowed people to sue over Roundup was shut down. The verdict won by someone was voided, and that's another example of the very trend you were talking about.
Yeah. And so again, the most important job of the Supreme Court throughout our history is to make sure Americans know what the law is, that the whole system knows what the law is, so that we can have the rule of law. And the Roberts Court, whether it's in making up new doctrines like major questions and that they can't agree what that is, or in questions like federalism, which in this moment is enormously important, they cannot tell us what the law is. And all these unsigned opinions of theirs, this shadow docket stuff, where you have all the precedent here and they're telling us to go there without any reason, leaves federal judges not knowing what the law is. This is a catastrophic failure of John Roberts.
Right. And on that very point, again, another ruling that same day overturning Hawaii's gun law.
Right.
One of the key points of the dissent by, I believe, again, it was Justice Jackson, talking about the fact that Hawaii, back to the days that it was widely known as the Sandwich Islands, had strict gun control. She said, if Justice Thomas, if he establishes the historical tradition test in Bruin, well, Hawaii's historical traditions are strict gun regulations. Yep. And now that same court, that same conservative supermajority is saying that that tradition must be overturned when it tends in favor of a political position they don't like.
It's very hard to hear John Roberts say we're not politicians. People misunderstand us when their decisions seem so outcome focused, when precedent matters so little, when their own ideas about their political philosophy are only ideas when they're convenient, and when the timing of their choice of when to act and when not could not be more partisan. It's very hard to maintain that this is a legitimate court when it comes to law and a nonpartisan court.
Especially, and I keep coming back to that Alabama case, when you have the court saying specifically that the decision that led to a fairer map in Alabama was expressly allowed in the decision, that the Calais decision that gutted the Voting Rights Act. And then it finally comes back to them with a different result. And we see, again, another partisan split where only the Democratic appointed justices are honoring the spirit of the original Calais decision, saying that yes, the Voting Rights Act can be enforced to block explicit racial discrimination.
Yeah. Well, again, they either don't see it or they see it and they like it. But they also, in those cases, and we've talked about this, but it bears talking about again, they also said a couple of years ago, hey, it's too close to an election. You can't put in that you can't change the map to get rid of the racist map. And now they said, never mind that it's close to election. Please do change the map to impose a racist map. Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that was one of the points made by that unanimous panel in Alabama, saying that in order to reinstate the racist map, that it would cause this chaos, that they would have to make all of these last minute changes before an election. And that was one of the reasons why they stuck to their original decision, again, thrown into chaos by the 6-3 supermajority.
Remind us what big cases they have yet to rule on, and they're very big. But they're going to like drop those in the last minute and then flee the country, I think.
Absolutely. Well, there is a birthright citizenship case coming up where they will decide on Trump's purported ban of birthright citizenship, the constitutionally protected right, and recognized by even the Supreme Court for more than a century.
I don't understand this. I mean, I just don't understand it. This little book says all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States.
Right.
How much clearer can you be?
Well, I think that Trump is banking on this idea that if someone either at the Heritage Foundation or some other right-wing outfit can come up with a legal theory, the fringe legal theory that, jurisdiction doesn't mean that, what it seems to be a very straightforward thing that if I commit a crime on U.S. territory, I'm subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. Yeah. But if they can come up with some fringe legal theory, might as well throw in an executive order, because maybe I can convince a court to adopt what is now the view of the Heritage Foundation or America First Foundation or whatever have you. And along the way, and I make this point frequently, Edwin, Trump has already scored a major victory in the birthright citizenship case, because this is the second time it's gone up to the Supreme Court. The first time, they didn't challenge it on the merits. They challenged universal injunctions, nationwide injunctions, and they won.
A huge victory for him.
It was a huge victory. And so I think that this strategy of finding some sort of a scholar or fringe activist who will kind of, rubber stamp some sort of policy objective that they want and turn it into an executive order. And maybe they'll win something along the way. Maybe they don't win the full thing. And I listen to those oral arguments. I'd be very surprised if the Supreme Court handed Trump a win here. But as I said, he's already gotten a win along the way. And so there is this incentivizing of Trump to try to issue executive orders that plainly violate constitutional rights, because what is the disincentive? He's already won something along the way.
That's right. The court should never have taken the case, but okay. So there's more out there. There's mail-in voting, right? I think there's still out there question of transgender girls and women in sports, and I mean, what else do we have to look forward to?
There's also Trump's power over the Federal Reserve. That is coming to a head. And that is a very important case. This Supreme Court already, through the shadow docket, has been very accommodating of Trump's gutting of independent agencies. So far, there appears to have been a possible red line with the Federal Reserve, which is specifically protected under the Federal Reserve Act. They seem to be skeptical of Trump's power to manipulate that. But we will see, because if Trump has the unilateral power to just fabricate some sort of allegation against a Federal Reserve governor who displeases him, and on that basis, without any process, change the composition of that to gain control of the central
Then
bank,
it's no longer independent.
then it's no longer independent, and he has seized a power that all authoritarians want, dream of, and use.
Okay. Well, I see we are out of time, overtime, which is no good. I really appreciate these conversations, Adam, and I appreciate your work. And everybody who's listening, All Rise News. Find it. It's on Substack. You will be smarter for doing it, and you will be much better armed for those conversations you need to have over the 4th of July. Thanks, Adam.
Thank you so much, Edwin.
Welcome back to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820.
All right, everybody. I got a treat for you. I told you at the beginning of the show, Virginia Cantor is Chief Counsel and Director of Anti-Corruption and Ethics at the Democracy Defenders Fund. Can you imagine that in this administration? Virginia, thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me.
But just will you remind everybody about the Democracy Defenders Fund and your work?
Oh, absolutely. So we were, founded just a couple of years ago, but joined by many of us who have an extensive background in fighting corruption. And that's one of our primary missions, is to fight corruption, to uphold the rule of law, and to protect free and fair elections.
Look, people look at the Trump administration as the most corrupt administration ever and the most violative of the rule of law. So they would say, well, you haven't done very much. But that's wrong. You have done an enormous amount to slow them down. And I think it's worth to just talk a little bit about how you have slowed down this assault. And then I want to get to the more current Todd Blanche stuff.
Well, my work has focused largely on anti-corruption, and we focus primarily on, tracking Trump's crypto corruption. My colleagues have brought various cases, including one that's soon to be, it's pending before the Supreme Court, the birthright citizenship case. So, trying to, again, uphold the rule of law there. We've also brought, other types of litigation. We've tracked, like I said, my personal involvement has been tracking the corrupt activities as much as we possibly can, and including by bringing bar complaints, which is what we did recently in connection with Todd Blanche.
Well, then let's turn to that. So this week, you and a collection of former federal judges filed a complaint with the Supreme Court of New York alleging ethics violations on the part of Trump's Roy Cohn, acting Attorney General Todd Blanche. So I guess first, because not everybody who's listening is a lawyer, explain to folks why a complaint like this goes to the New York Supreme Court.
So every attorney who's practicing in the United States, in order to practice, they have to be licensed by a state bar. And in Todd, I'm a member of the Maryland bar. Todd Blanche is a member of the New York State Bar. And as a result, all of us as practicing lawyers are subject to professional rules of responsibility, and as is he. And if you fail to comply with those rules, then you are subject to disciplinary action. In this case, we filed our organization, along with lawyers defending American democracy, and 101 former state and federal judges filed a bar complaint with the Attorney Grievance Committee, which is a committee within the Supreme Court of the state of New York. And we raised various allegations regarding his bar violations, including conflicts of interest.
Well, let's get to before we do that, before we get to the media complaint, I have another question, I guess. Isn't this precisely what Pam Bondi tried to stop? Didn't she argue that Justice Department lawyers are not bound by state ethics laws?
She did. And we had actually filed a complaint against her with the Florida State Bar. And under their interpretation of their jurisdiction. They determined that they did not have jurisdiction over constitutional officers, which would have, and they interpreted that to mean when she was a sitting government official within the executive branch of the federal government.
So you're going forward now that she is not?
We did refile. We did refile.
Congratulations.
So there is one pending against her, for her failure to supervise the attorneys who engaged in all kinds of inappropriate conduct in connection with various cases they brought where there wasn't probable cause, and also in connection with her failure to comply with the Epstein Files Transparency Act.
Of course. All right, well, let's turn to Todd Blanche and get to the meat of the complaint. The first part is the corrupt, self-dealing, so-called Trump versus IRS. This is where Todd Blanche's signature is on a page with Donald Trump, I guess, where they have mutually pledged to each other their lack of, lack of honor. This is where this is the slush fund and family immunity deal.
Exactly. So this case arose out of a $10 billion complaint that President Trump filed in January 2025 with the Department of Justice, alleging that the government violated his rights by leaking his tax returns. And he filed with his sons and also with his businesses. The leak at issue involved 400, I think it was something like 400,000 other taxpayers, and the Department of Justice fought those similar complaints that were filed against the government, in that case, the IRS and the Department of Treasury, because in most cases they were time barred. There's a 2-year statute of limitation, and there was also a significant question that the statute they were seeking relief under applied only to government leaks by government employees and not government contractors, which was the case with President Trump, his sons, and his businesses. And what's really crazy is that Todd Blanche and his department, his attorneys, failed to raise either of those issues. They failed to make an appearance, first of all. Then not only did they not make an appearance in that case, but they also failed to raise any defenses, any affirmative defenses, including the statute of limitations, including the fact that they sought relief under a statute that wouldn't allow for them to be granted relief.
So for a non-lawyer, it sounds like what you're telling me is they went to court in order to lose. They went to court and threw in the towel. They didn't even try.
They didn't try at all.
By the way, parentheses, did not the Biden administration find the leaker and prosecute him?
Yes. Actually, Mr. Littlejohn was sentenced and was held to account for the underlying action. So basically, what this case that was brought by Trump, his family, and his business, Trump v. IRS, was then used as a setup, if you will, to get the government to create a slush fund for Trump's January 6th insurrectionists, and also to create a release from an extraordinarily broad release from tax liability, past tax liability owed by him, his family members, and his businesses, which is alleged to be to the tune of something like $100 million. In addition, this settlement agreement, which included the slush fund, the tax liability waiver, it also included a waiver for any liability for affiliated persons, as well as for matters that were pending, known and unknown to be pending before any other agency or department.
Okay, so sounds completely corrupt to me, but why is that specifically a violation of New York's rules of professional responsibility?
Because Todd Blanche had a responsibility to provide competent and diligent representation, which he did not do. by failing to raise these
I see.
defenses. It also creates tremendous potential liability for other cases that are pending before the federal government. So his duty as the Attorney General is owed to the United States. And
Well, therein lies the biggest problem.
exactly. Because he represented Trump in his personal capacity in a couple of cases that were also settled under this settlement agreement. So he also violated, we allege that he violated conflicts of interest provisions that apply to him as an attorney. But there's also a question about whether this settlement, and this is being challenged now when the judge the judge in the Florida case raised the issue of whether there was an actual case or controversy here. And another set of 35 judges also raised a question about there was whether this was a collusive settlement. And so
I wanted to ask you about that.
Mhm.
Again, remember, most people who are listening are not lawyers.
Yes,
You mean a lawyer can't be on both sides of the deal?
exactly. Not only can the lawyer not be on both sides of the deal, but the same party can't be on both sides of the deal. So here in this case, you have President Trump in his personal capacity suing because he's alleging the government violated his obligations to keep his tax returns private. But he's also supervising the Attorney General, so he's also engaged in his official capacity.
So Virginia, help me keep those two straight. So when President Trump is on both sides of the deal, that gets at the question Florida's considering, whether or not this was a real case in controversy and whether or not it was collusive. Todd Blanche being on both sides of the deal gets at the ethics question you were talking about in New York.
So Todd Blanche also entered an appearance on behalf of President Trump in his personal capacity before President Trump took office the second time, in connection with two cases that were in which Trump also raised claims under something known as the Federal Tort Claims Act. And one of those involved the Mar-a-Lago classified case, and the other involved the Russian hoax. So he's now appearing in and supervising this settlement agreement. He actually signed off on the settlement agreement documents, and he also entered appearances in cases that were settled under this purported settlement agreement.
Okay,
and I apologize. I feel like it is, pretty messy, but I think that's part of their playbook.
That's why we have lawyers, and that's why, and it's why you guys do good work when you're not corrupt.
Yeah.
So let me ask you just one more thing on this particular part of your complaint. Above and beyond it being a violation of professional responsibility, someone could lose his license over. In a future, if you had an honest Justice Department, are there potential criminal problems with what he did?
We have to be very careful what we say here, but if it was part of a corrupt scheme, I would think that any future department would want to look at what's going on here.
I appreciate that. I won't go. All right, but as terrible as that is, that wasn't all that you complained about in your complaint. There were a couple other points. We should talk about those too. For example, you threw in the habit of the Justice Department under his leadership to engage in vindictive prosecutions.
Right. Absolutely. With respect to James Comey, they brought two cases. And one of which was basically, determined not to have, a sufficient basis, and the judge who was presiding on it, actually alluded to the fact that potentially there was misleading information brought before the grand jury with respect to the first case brought against James Comey. What's even crazier is that they brought a second case under Todd Blanche's, the 8647 Seashell case, which I mean, I don't think there's any reasonable person who thinks that there could be any probable cause for bringing that case.
Let me stop you. Todd Blanche went on television when that happened and told the world, oh, what you see is not all the evidence. We really have smoking guns here, right? Which is unusual for an AG to do, but we've not seen any smoking guns. We think that's all BS.
Right. And of course, the Department of Justice is supposed to really speak through their indictments, when you start pontificating about what kind of evidence you have, you potentially prejudice the jury. And that appears to be what Todd Blanche has done in this case as well.
Okay, so that does I don't think your complaint does, because you filed it sort of just as we were learning about this. But if there is a hearing about this, I live in Chicago. The Broadview 6 stuff is here. We have an entire AG's office that is like now throwing out all kinds of things because they were corruptly getting grand jury indictments for God knows how long, for how many reasons.
Right.
And that's on his watch.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why, there are only so many checks on a corrupt government, right? Because the president has the pardon power. If the Department of Justice is the one who holds the key to prosecution, you're not and they've kind of dismantled the public integrity section. It's kind of like almost all the checks have gone out the window. But if you're an attorney and you are engaging in unethical conduct, one of the ways we can hold you accountable, and it's a very serious device to be making these types of allegations.
Well, just so people know that you can be successful at this.
Yeah.
There were a couple of lawyers whose names were in the news, particularly with regard to all that led up to January 6th, who have lost their licenses, right?
Yes, Jeffrey Clark is certainly one of them. The other name.
Well, it's Rudy Giuliani and one of his.
Of course, Rudy Giuliani.
Yeah, Jeffrey Clark and Rudy Giuliani.
And in fact, Rudy Giuliani lost his license in New York.
Yeah.
And he, of course, had one of the most stellar reputations, following 9/11. I mean, he was America's mayor. And, this affiliation and this insane loyalty to Donald Trump, it serves, he seems to come out okay. But the lawyers who defend him, I mean, their reputations are ruined and often at the cost of losing their professional license.
My view, you're a lawyer, you won't go this far, and you shouldn't. Donald Trump has corrupted everything he's ever touched. And many powerful people with good reputations have lost everything. And I put some of the biggest law firms in America in that category for having bent the knee when they surely did not need to, when his complaints against them were frivolous. And pardon me, Skadden, I thought you were better lawyers than this. You would make a tougher deal, and you're not alone, but God bless the Jenners of the world who stood up.
Yeah. And, we actually have brought a bar complaint with Eldad based on Boris Epstein's involvement in that effort to, basically get these law firms to bend the knee. Good. Because of his role in it.
Yeah. All right, but enough. You weren't finished because there's still his role in the Epstein files. So talk about that too.
This is probably to me, it's one of the worst offenses because this administration came in with the promise that they were going to release all the Epstein files. And Pam Bondi, one of the things she made clear when she testified on the Hill was that Todd Blanche was personally involved in many of these decisions. And not only was he involved, but there's now reporting that there was an actual strategy meeting in the Situation Room of the White House to talk about how to basically
protect Donald Trump from what's in those files.
Because he was named, thousands of times, right, in the files. And also, he was personally involved in interviewing Ghislaine Maxwell and having her move from the minimum security prison to the low security camp, which completely runs afoul of the Department of Justice's and the Bureau of Prisons policy. But what's the real travesty here is that they were failing to release documents that they were obligated to release. When they did release documents, they were releasing survivor information that should have been redacted. They never have made a full accounting of all of the documents that are covered by the statute. And again, our concern is that he has placed his personal loyalty to President Trump above his obligations to the United States, which is his client now. He's got an inherent conflict of interest as a result of that, and he should be disciplined because of it.
I mean, and Donald Trump signed the Epstein law, right?
Yes.
He shows what his signature is worth. He's complaining about an auto pen. He can sign it in blood. It doesn't mean anything to him.
This is the greatest travesty because as a law, it's very, very simple. There's a contained number of records that are responsive to this request. The Congress passed a statute, bipartisan. The president signed it. And it is the Department of Justice's responsibility under the leadership of Todd Blanche to release every record that's responsive to that statute. And they have failed to do that.
Have they been asked to do? Has somebody sued and said you haven't complied? And has any court yet ruled on that litigation?
Yes. So
violating that too.
There have been at least 3 cases. So we have filed FOIA requests for documents pertaining to President Trump that are contained within the Epstein files, for any documents in the Epstein files that refer to the cover-up, how the Department of Justice instructed the FBI agents to review these and redact documents. Mm-hmm. And then the third part is having to do with the transfer of Ghislaine Maxwell to the low security camp. Our colleague Katie Fang brought with the
journalists fighting back.
Yeah,
good for Katie.
She's stellar. Brought what they call an Administrative Procedures Act complaint with Brendan Ballou from the Public Integrity Project. And the judge in that case just ordered the department to release the responsive documents under that case. So slowly, but surely the wheels of justice are winding, and hopefully the survivors will get the documents that really reveal who these individuals were who were assaulting them. And in the meantime, we will try to hold Todd Blanche accountable for his ethical violations.
Do you have any concern that they will actually destroy these documents?
Yeah, of course we do. But they're all operating. There's a couple of potential checks. Anytime we file a lawsuit, they're under a court order to maintain those documents. So if for some reason they were to destroy them, they would be in contempt of court.
If we knew it. Yeah.
If we know it. But the other thing is there were many individuals who have been working on these survivor cases, and including James Comey's daughter. And
right,
so
that's right.
My sense is that they will know if there are documents missing, they will know.
We will have witnesses.
Yes.
Yeah. Where was this document? Yeah. Good. All right. So now what's the process? You filed this. How, is this something we should expect to take 12 years to solve?
Well, I have to say, we've been working on this for months. My colleague, Chris Schwartz, my colleague Norm Eisen, and with LDAD, we've been working on the complaint for months. It ended up being 70 pages, which is not it's not a typical complaint that we file. This is, and there's extraordinary amount of detail and extraordinary amount of
I learned a lot reading it.
Yeah, a lot of, potential violations. So it'll be up to the grievance committee to review and then take action. Sometimes it can take a while. But again, at the end of the day, we're looking for accountability.
Well, but the day for me if from my perspective, I kind of want to have some response before his hearings to be confirmed as Attorney General.
Well, that's a very good point. We expect that the Judiciary Committee, his hearing is July 15th and 16th.
Yep.
I think it's extremely important for your listeners to be reaching out to members of the committee to make sure that they ask questions about these alleged violations of his ethical responsibilities. And each of these, areas of investigation, including the $1.776 billion slush fund.
Forgive me, Virginia.
Yeah.
They should be reaching out to members of the Congressional Committee or the people in the New York State Bar. Who do you mean?
Well, the Judiciary Committee, because one of the greatest dangers is he was just nominated by President Trump to be confirmed as the Attorney General to replace Pam Bondi. So the immediate concern is that he not be appointed to that position on a permanent basis.
Not be approved to it. Yeah, sure, of course. I think the Democrats in Congress will be ready for this conversation.
I hope so.
I think they will be absolutely ready for it. I think their Republican colleagues have demonstrated that they will vote for him no matter what. They have shown maybe now that,
well, if you have listeners in North Carolina where, Senator Tillis, he's on the Judiciary Committee. I know Senator Durbin, is the ranking member on it. So I'm sure your listeners are familiar with him. But Senator Cornyn, who was also recently slighted by President Trump, he's on the committee as well. So we, there are a number of senators. If you're from Alaska, Senator Murkowski.
You've raised a point that I didn't think. You think it can be stopped in committee even before it gets out of committee. That's a great thought.
My hope is
we
that
actually have a better shot of stopping it in committee than if it gets to the full Senate.
Right. And to be honest with you, anybody who's sympathetic to the survivors of the Epstein activity, they need to step up and have their voices heard, because this is the man who oversaw the process. And I think we can all say that was a corrupt process, and he should not be taking over the Department of Justice on a permanent basis.
I couldn't agree with you more. On all counts. Thank you so much for your work and for your time. If you were the author of that complaint, it is clear. It is a non-lawyer can read it and get a lot out of it. And where, if they want to find it, can people find your work?
democracydefenders.org. We welcome your viewing, and democracydefendersfund.org. And then we also, our sister organization is democracydefendersaction.org.
Yep. Well, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care.
Nice to meet you. Bye-bye.
And you. All right, everybody. We'll take a quick break, and I'm taking your calls when you come back.
You're listening to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820.
All right, everybody, 773-763-9278. I'm taking your calls. Start with Jim.
Hi, Edwin. The sentences down in Texas for the anti-fascist, some defendants got between 30 to 100 years in prison. Todd Blanche, the Clarence Darrow of the 21st century, was crowing about it, how these dangerous anti-fascists deserve to be executed, probably. Forget the 100 years. In the meantime, the January 6th defendants, under a similar statute, got, the most was 15 years, 19 years, whatever. But they're still got their tongues hanging out for money from Trump. They're still not giving up on that one. And Trump hasn't really said I'm keeping $2 billion on the side just in case. I mean, this is absolutely absurd. The whole thing is so insane. But those poor people down there. First, it was the 4th of July. So they got caught for fireworks. They claimed that they brought guns. One guy did shoot one, but the guy that got 100 years claims that one of the ICE agents was shooting, pointed his rifle at another protester, so he shot him first. The point is, I'm not going to relitigate it, but the sentences are insane, totally insane. But it sends the message that if anybody gets out of line in a protest, they can look at 100 years in jail, 50 years, because Todd Blanche says those are anti-faith. Those are, they're a conspiracy group. Everything's a conspiracy with this guy. And just on a lighter note, what I'm living for is I want to see Pope Leo throw out the first pitch virtually from the Vatican to the Sox playoff game. What do you think, Edwin? I love.
Well, if the Sox do make the playoffs, it's a bit of a miracle. So I guarantee you'll throw out the first pitch from the Vatican, right from the balcony. Anyway, you have a great weekend, man. Take care. Thank you so much. Thank you. All right, Dave.
Hey, good afternoon. This is my first time call to your show.
Well, thank you for calling, and thank you for being part of this.
And by the way, I'm both a Cubs and Sox fan. You can be both. Don't let anybody tell you different. You can be both.
Okay.
We definitely got to do something about this crazy administration. I'm telling you, they're getting away with murder, literally. With ICE killing people in the streets. We definitely have to do something. And I hope that we can do it during the midterms. We're in a very serious crisis. We have lost our democracy. We're in Nazi Germany right now, folks. We're in Nazi Germany. That's what we are in right now.
Let me ask you a question about that, Dave, because I am not underestimating the threat. I believe the president is whatever the modern American equivalent of fascist is to the core, an autocrat, wants all the power, unwilling to give it up, perfectly willing to cheat to have it. And by the way, what he uses it for, the power that he has, is utterly corrupt. He doesn't use that power for the benefit of Americans. Totally agree with all of that. But I see something that did not exist in the 1930s in Germany. I see an enormous and strong opposition. I see people out there unafraid, despite the fact that the president shot two protesters, president's team, not the president, but that ICE shot and killed two protesters, shot one of them in the back, for God's sake, in the middle of the winter in Minneapolis, that they threw people in prison for a 100-year sentence. It's still not deterring Americans from showing up and protesting. It's not deterring journalists now who are stepping up and telling the truth. I think we are stronger than they were in Germany in the 30s. I think the threat is just as real, but I think the American people are going to prove to the world once again that we are able to take down fascist threats. What do you think?
John Lemon get off. I really would like to see him get off. Do you think he will?
Yes, even if he's corruptly, charged and run through here, I think justice will prevail soon. Yes, John Lemon did nothing.
I really hope you're right, because so much of this is so serious. It's almost unbelievable, but now it is. It should
be unbelievable. It should not happen. It never should have happened, to use a phrase that Trump likes. This never should have been allowed to happen. But the most corrupt man has been put in charge of the most powerful country in the world, and he's abused those powers. Look, it took 250 years.
He should be behind prison bars.
Yeah, I agree with you. But David, it took our country 250 years to get a president this bad. We've been on a roll. 250 years it took to get a man this bad in the White House. And now that we've seen it, I don't think anybody's going to be eager to go back. I think we are going to.
I got to tell you something. else. Way some time back, I was beaten up by two ICE agents. I was almost beat to a pulp. And by the way, I'm totally blind. I was almost beat to a pulp. And I was minding my own business coming out of a store, and there were two guys. When ICE was in Chicago, these were two guys that stopped me, and they threw me on the ground, and they cursed me out, And they told me they were ICE agents, so I believed them. I challenged them. I said, well, I wanted to show them my ID. I said, I'll show you my ID. Arrest me if you need to. And they told me, we should kill you. We should kill you. But they let me go.
I'm very sorry you went through that. I'm very sorry anybody has to
let me go. They let me go, but it was quite a traumatic experience.
I thank you for sharing that awful story. I appreciate it. And thank you for listening and for participating in part of this resistance. All right. Dan. Hello, Dan.
Hello, Edwin. How are you today, sir?
I'm actually pretty good today. I'm looking forward to the Pride Parade tomorrow. It's a beautiful day. I had a long walk in parts of Chicago yesterday, and I have been, I've had a very productive week talking to really interesting people and putting out a lot of content on a lot of different platforms to help us fight back. So me personally, I'm doing well, and I think our country is. I think our country is strengthening every day to deal with this madman.
Well, I don't know.
Have you seen what's going on in Washington today? Have you seen the news while
I do.
While we've been on the air,
Yes,
what he's doing in D.C.?
Yes, sir, I do. And this is why I don't know. I just felt I had to call.
Well, to talk about it.
First of all, we're looking into the abyss. I've told you that several times. I've been talking to you for the last several months.
Yep.
And
I agree with you,
Edwin. We're in the abyss. The only way we're going to know how deep it is come November and then especially January. He is on record as saying we will not allow communists to be put in office. Now, what do you think that means?
It means anybody doesn't like. It means anybody doesn't like.
They won't be sworn in. They won't be sworn in. And then what do we do then? That's a ways off, I admit, but this is where we're at. We just need to see how deep the abyss we're in because we're already in it. The other thing I'd like to bring up is this 400,000, 500,000 Haitians, Syrians, Somalis, God knows who, let alone the Mexicans and everybody else. I heard a report today that half of the nursing homes are going to have to close or go down to half because that is their main employees, is that segment of society in most of the country. They're already talking about it. They're already doing it. Now, I ask you, when that happens, along with the Medicaid cuts and the Medicare cuts, then what? Then what do we do? You talk fight, fight, fight. I understand that, and that's exactly what I want to do, Edwin. But eventually we're going to have to really mean it when we say that instead of protesting. Because when it comes January and they don't swear in the duly elected, if they even get a chance to be elected, what do we do then, sir? I ask you.
There are steps we are taking and must take and are taking before we get there so that does not happen. And let me just remind you that in Hungary, where their very favorite politician in the globe, Viktor Orban, controlled all the levers of power, as these guys don't yet, as they dream of doing, he lost by such big numbers that there was nothing he could do. There's nothing.
But they didn't have a Speaker of the House that could go on adjournment forever.
Sure they did. He absolutely controlled. They absolutely did. They absolutely controlled the legislator. They had super majorities in their legislation. They had the same ability to say it was corrupt, we're not seating them. But it was so overwhelming. They knew that millions and millions of people would have run them out of the country. They had no place to hide. And that's what's going to happen here. So we are doing everything we can to make all this transparent. We are the courts everywhere have held
ballots.
Well, I'm worried about mail-in ballots for sure.
Yeah, because I don't think Orban had mail-in ballots. I'm not sure.
No,
I don't know how that
and I
works.
don't.
Yeah.
I worry about mail-in ballots. I worry about them.
Absolutely.
Donald Trump has ordered and the court told him he couldn't do it, but he still ordered the Postal Service not to deliver mail-in ballots from states who have handed over their voter rolls to him.
In blue states, exactly.
Yeah, and
yes.
So we have to check and double check, but if it comes to it, if you're really going to play the doomsday scenario where they lose and they refuse to leave, well, look, we've been through that on January 6th. He lost, he refused to leave. That's what happened then. And they brought their goons out. And he didn't succeed then. He's not going to succeed now. That doesn't mean I don't agree with you. He's going to try, but
I pray. Of course he is. He's already doing it. We will not seat communists. It's just like Joseph McCarthy back in the 50s. You remember what I'm talking about. And this, at least we beat him. But how do we beat this? That's my question.
I want to talk to you when the new House has started its work next January. I want to talk to you.
Absolutely.
And we should throw a gigantic party for everyone listening on this show to come out and celebrate the begin. That won't be the end, but that will be the beginning. That will be a signpost that we have passed the beginning of the end. And it will be the beginning of the two ugliest, most miserable, most unhappy years of Donald Trump's life.
Well, I certainly hope so, because the last 10 years have been the most miserable of mine. Attributable to one person. So, but thank you, Edwin. I just want to throw that out there.
Hang in there.
All right. Bye.
All right, Paul. How are you?
Well, what might have been, what a glorious 250th anniversary of our independence it might have been. But I guess we're learning. Isn't it great? Because Washington, D.C. at this point, and I don't know what you were going to say is going on as we speak, but let's just take a stock. It's essentially a wreck. The National Mall is a disaster. The Kennedy Center is covered with a tarp. The reflecting pool is full of scum and peeled off paint. There's a big fence around it. There are speakers saying, do not loiter or you'll be arrested. What are some people supposed to do visiting there, the National Mall, except to be hanging around and enjoying? The White House is half torn down. It's a construction. The whole grounds is a construction disaster. Yeah, this is great. What a great job he's done. And we're stuck in an unending quagmire, a military quagmire that has devastating economic effects. And what might have been? What might have been had this guy never come into our lives 10 years ago, as the previous caller said? It's just, it's kind of like,
I'm going to challenge that. My conversation with Lisa Graves earlier, and I had another one, similar one with John Nichols at The Nation earlier this week, just fabulous conversations. And they talked about how the right wing has built its power since the Powell memo in the 70s, how they've done, all of this to favor the wealthy and corporations over ordinary Americans now for almost 50 years. I think what might have been is that they would have just done it a little more slowly and ended up in the same place. I think we are lucky to be in this precipice because you know what? Americans have had a chance to see over the hill at the ugly things that these people want to do. And I think we are going not only to stop them, but when we take power, we're going to use it. And I see this in the primaries where older Democrats are losing, and they're not losing because they're not progressive enough or they're not centrist enough. That's not the dynamic at play. What's at play is, are you coming to win or are you coming to make a deal? If you're coming to make a deal with the other guys, we're not with you anymore. Democrats are saying, we're voting you out. We want to send people there who are going there to win and win for us. And it's a younger generation.
I heard you ask
that. Yeah. So I just think
I heard you ask that question.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Of the first guest of your first, what was, is it that the baby boomers are, they're a different politics, or is a different generation? And I'm a baby boomer, and my politics are the same as they've always been. And what they've always been is, hey, am I here to win? No, I'm here to kick the other side's ass. And it's the same in football. It's the same in court. It's the same in politics. Listen, I'm not there to cheat. I'm there just to kick your butt. And that's what I don't – in the make a deal, the whole thing, why I think the regular sort of middle class, working class Democrats have stopped paying attention, and why the 2000 election should have never been, and the 2010 ho-hum that let the Tea Party in should have never been, is because these regular people just thought that, no, it's too sleepy. It's not that the Democrats don't represent what they want. People get angry at the Democrats because they see a team and I'm worried, and many people are worried, that when we win in the fall, our side is going to play not to lose football. Sit on the ball, 3 and out, that kind of stuff, that kind of football, that they're not going to try to score. And that's what you're supposed to do, is score. This side is showing you how to do it. They're scoring.
I agree.
And then we have Hakeem Jeffries. Hakeem Jeffries is saying, but Hakeem Jeffries said this week that he thinks Zero Mondavi, he doesn't want Zero Mondavi to drag the party too far to the left. Zero Mondavi is going to drag the whole damn party too far to the left. And I'm like, get out of here, dude. Just get out of here. Because he's going to go back to business as usual. Let's make a deal. And that's how we got where we are. It's because the people are saying, no. We're not going to take what we can get. We want people who want to damn well score. And that means touchdowns, not field goals, and not 3 and outs. You understand my analogies, right?
I did something I haven't done honestly, I'm going to really date myself, in 40 years this week. And it's related to what you just said. I was a Chicago alderman, but I haven't been one in almost 40 years. But this week I went back to city council to testify about something, because our mayor has, that Chicago signed a deal ages ago to give away its parking meters. It was just the worst deal ever. And so all the revenue from people who park at parking meters goes to a private equity firm owned, I think, in Qatar. That firm, I promise you, this is coming back to what you were saying, I promise. That firm now wants to sell the contract to somebody else, to another private equity firm. And the city's there's some conditions that the city can look at and say no, otherwise they have to say yes. And all of the lawyers are saying, there's no way you can say no. If you say no, you'll be sued, you'll lose a lot of money. But the people they want to sell it to are the people who own, in their portfolio of companies, Omni Air. And Omni Air is the biggest operator of ICE flights in the country. They are the ones who shackle people on their jets and bring them to third countries. So they can be shackled in their jets for 30 hours to be brought to the Congo, for instance, as they were last week, or to Qatar, right? Yeah. And so I went down to the city council to say, are you kidding me? You do not send our parking meter revenue to the company that owns these jets that are shackling people and sending them all over the place. And I don't care what your lawyers tell you, you don't do this. And they're like, whoa, but. And you're like, I'm with you, Paul. You do not play that game. There's just some things you say, no, don't do it. Right? Like, we need to fight.
And did they listen? It's unbelievable. I mean, not only that you don't do that, we should be doing everything we can to drive companies like that out of business.
Yeah,
that's just cruelty. And we have unprecedented Samuel Alito barking at Justice Sotomayor this week while she gave her dissent from the bench on the case about, enforcing different immigration policies. And you know what? You know what that tells you? That tells you if he's willing to do that in open court, treat her that way, that he's treated her a lot worse in chambers. And the reason he does, because it's this is what you can do to women and people of color, and probably has done the same to Ketanji Brown Jackson. And the reason he does is because he's confident that he isn't going to get punched out, because he wouldn't do that to a man.
Well,
and,
they're going to lose it all.
He's a
Paul,
punk and a little pipsqueak.
They're going to lose it all because we are not going back to let's make a deal. Not happening. They have proven themselves who they are after hiding in the woods for 40 years, creeping up and creeping up and creeping up, and, inch by inch, sort of peeling away the power of civil society to defend itself. And they thought they had us where they could take it all. And you know what? We came back on the field. We came back on the field.
And I say I hope so, because in 2000, the ho-hum, working class Democrats didn't come out strong enough. So you all know about the 2000 election, okay?
Yeah.
And that led to justices on the court that went in this direction, and then again, and of course,
we didn't see the threat like we see it now.
And then in 2010, nobody took this Tea Party thing, and I got another census here. And 2010, and of course, we elect the first black president and withdraw all his support.
Yeah.
and it's just like, and then unbelievably, 6 years later, we handed it over to this guy who he's the worst.
I can't even.
I'll tell you, the first time, it's just, it's just how people can do this. I guess it has to get desperate enough. It's like they say about whatever, you have to hit rock bottom. Well,
and here we are.
We have, and I hope it's, and here we are, and that's when people are willing to wake up. Okay, it's like, but there's another proverb, a word to the wise is but sufficient. So maybe we could wisen up. It's like my dad used to say, wisen up.
All right, Paul, thank you. I'm going to try. I got 1.5 minutes, and I got one more caller I want to get in. Sal.
Hi, Edwin. Thanks for all you do. Your show is an island of sanity in my week.
Oh, well, thank you. That's so kind.
Yeah. I want to talk about how Trump's thugocracy, his way of corrupting everything he touches, is not affecting just America, just the United States, but other countries in America, especially the Latin American ones. We saw Colombia turn to the right, and I'm sure that was done with the assistance of money or support from the Trump administration.
Trump endorsed and helped the candidate. Yep, who won.
Yeah.
And he's now fighting with Mexico, too. Yep.
And one of the most glaring examples is the case of Juan Orlando Hernandez from Honduras, who was judged and convicted of immense drug smuggling and money laundering and sentenced to prison. He's been pardoned by Trump, while at the same time, Trump is destroying people on fishing boats for alleged drug smuggling with no judicial oversight. And that is corrupting the governance system, not only of the United States, but also of the world. And we need to hold that aspect of Trump and his crimes accountable.
I agree with you. Sal, that's got to be our last word because we're out of time for today. But thank you for calling, and thank you all for being part of this. I will not be joining you next week. I wish you all the very happiest 4th of July. Paul will be here. He will be ably manning the show. It'll be great. And I look forward to talking to you after the holiday. Celebrate our country as it deserves to be celebrated, not as Mr. Trump sees it.